Good evening. Welcome. Calling the meeting to order. Welcome to the West Hartford Public Schools Board of Education regular meeting on this Tuesday, October the 18th, 2022. Let us begin with our roll call. Charlotte, please.
Dr. Chang.
Here.
Mr. Goldman.
Present.
Ms. Nezarella.
Present.
Ms. Poland.
Here.
Dr. Steinberg.
Here.
Dr. Thomas-Farquharson.
Here.
Student Representative Megan Murphy.
Here.
Student Representative Amira Hugh-White.
Here.
I'm sorry about that. And Dr. Harris.
Here. Thank you so much. And just for some insight, we have a guest representative with us today. Caitlin, tonight is senior night for field hockey. So here to represent her is Amira Hugh-White. So thank you so much for joining us. And with that, we'll have our Pledge of Allegiance. Megan, may you please lead?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have a suggested revision to the agenda order. We certainly know that we have a robust discussion and agenda planned for us today. However, we want to acknowledge that we have many participants here, especially our young people, as it relates to Section 6B for staff communications and reports. So I am making a motion that following our non-staff communications and reports, we then have in Section 6B, staff reports and board discussions, our post-secondary transition program report, as well as our state assessment results, literacy, mathematics, and science report. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so much for your flexibility. We now will have public communications. This is an opportunity where we're able to hear from you your thoughts, your concerns, your suggestions. Each individual is allowed 3 minutes, and there are 21 minutes per subject matter. When you come to the podium, please share your name and give your address. As you're speaking, be mindful of Charlotte, who will hold up a yellow card when you have 1 minute remaining in your time. And when your time has expired, you will see a red card, and we ask for you to respectfully take your seat at that time. We do have a sign-up, and I will go down those who are listed here. And first we have the SAVE group.
Hello, everyone. My name is Skyla Nelson. I'm a junior at Conard High School, and today myself and my peers are here asking you to support SAVE Club in all this entails. Due to the rising and serious mental health crisis in adolescents, we have created a new Sandy Hook Promise SAVE Club, which stands for Students Against Violence Everywhere. Our focus is both on school-wide and district-wide prevention. This work includes both creating and hosting events that establish and spread support for our community throughout the entire school year. This work includes partnering with other clubs such as GSA and FEMCO, which highlight marginalized voices. This is important as it promotes intersectionality and advocacy within the mental health conversation. This work includes collaborating with other voices across the district to make sure that we spread this very important message. That is why we're here in front of you today. If our community raises our children to be leaders, to be compassionate, and to highlight and be aware of what's going on in the world, then we need the board's support and efforts to keep our community's children safe and well in all aspects. This includes physical, mental, and emotional, all of which are equally important if we want to prevent further tragedies in our community.
Hello, I'm Quinlan Brooks, a 9th grade student at Conard High School. I grew up in South Florida, and I vividly remember Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2018, when a tragic school shooting occurred at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. 17 lives were lost. 17 innocent lives taken by one person at a place that is supposed to be safe. 17 lives that have completely changed the lives of so many more. I witnessed firsthand the terrible effects that tragedy and those 17 lives had on my community. Through my young eyes, I could see the hearts shattered at the loss of friends, family, and loved ones. I could feel the fear of thousands of kids terrified to go to school every day. We were too young to be afraid of losing our lives. Our safety at a place where we were supposed to be safely and happily learning should not have been questioned. As we were learning about life, our lives shouldn't have been threatened. No lives in any school, in any community, should ever be threatened. To this day, I still have anxiety about going to school because of the fear that I won't return home. I needed to take a stand, so now, years later, I joined the SAFE Club in the hopes to prevent West Hartford from a similar tragedy. Please support the West Hartford cause to save lives.
Hi, my name is Anaya Walker, a junior at Conard High School. This year, the SAVE group helped organize the Sandy Hook Promise Start with Hello and Say Something Week at Conard. We are doing more prevention activities such as large stretch management, training for all students after school before midterms, and a wellness week in May with prevention activities, booths, and local community providers to help students learn their community resources. We are also looking to create stress balls with the crisis text line for each student to have their own. Lastly, we will be looking at what the schools can do at all grade levels to help destigmatize mental health and create a culture of prevention in West Hartford. But we need your support to make this all happen. We need your support and funds to support district-wide staff for mental support and listening to SAVE's Club initiatives and policy recommendations we develop over the course of the year. Thank you.
Thank you. We next have Tracy Wilson.
Thank you so much to the Conard students for that presentation. My name is Tracy Wilson, and I live at 251 Ridgewood Road. I come today to speak in favor of the passage of West Hartford Board of Education Policy 8355, addressing meeting conduct and public comment. I support this measure as a safeguard to our democracy in a town in a small r Republican government where elected officials represent citizens in their deliberations. Recently, it seems, those speaking during the time of public comment use their time to question the motives of elected officials with harsh words to those who are here to serve as policymakers for the public schools. These attempts to intimidate those who have been elected to serve the teachers and students in this town go against the very nature of democratic government and public schools. While the board has been patient and has bravely listened to these attacks, the time has come to put the comments about items not on the agenda at the end of the meeting so that the board can address its agenda. As we work in this town to build a beloved community, one where all children and adults are treated with respect and kindness, I think these rules can help to lessen the tension and the animosity that commenters sling at elected officials. Democracies are fragile, and attacks on volunteer elected individuals can have a chilling effect on citizens who might choose to run for office. I ask you on both sides of the aisle to adopt this measure to keep small r Republican government alive and well in this town. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Beth Bai.
Good evening. I'm so pleased to be here before you, and I thank you so much for your service. My name is Beth Bai. I live at 251 Ridgewood Road, same address as Tracy, actually. I'm here today. I wanted to start by recognizing Jack Darcy. Some of you might remember Jack Darcy, a longtime Board of Ed chair. Jack loved a good meeting. He loved a meeting that ran smoothly. When he started as chair of the board, the meetings would go till midnight sometimes. When he chaired the board, an hour and a half. That's how it went. You were here. He didn't want to discourage people from running. He thought you need to run a smooth meeting. And we listened to all public comment. And Jack passed away this year. And because of the pandemic and his older age, he was never recognized. So I just want to take a moment to recognize him today and all that he taught me about how to run a meeting. I'm here to talk about the policy as well. And I want to start by saying West Hartford's a really unusual community. We are so lucky here with the kind of district we have and the quality of the district that we have. And this doesn't happen by accident. It's decades of public comment, of wonderful elected officials, agree, disagree, but people in this town comment. As a state senator, and I see Matt walked in who was an aide, my aides felt so jealous of legislative aides from other districts because in West Hartford, so many people would call our office and had opinions and ideas, and that's what makes our town great. I think the strategy that we had when I was on the board 20 years ago of before the meeting, it's agenda items. The Board of Education's getting ready to take up policies, to listen to policies, and to make a decision. So they need that information from the public about what they think about the items before them. And then what we did was, if it was not an agenda item, people would testify at the end of the meeting. We never left a meeting before everyone who was here to testify testified, despite Jack's hour-and-a-half rule. Sometimes it went longer. But I think in terms of helping our decision makers make decisions and helping our staff who are here to provide information, it makes a lot more sense to take information from the public on the items that you'll be voting on at that time. And then whatever item others are here for, they'll go before the meeting when their item is before you. So I think, Madam Chair and board members, this is a really sensible policy, and it will lead to better decision-making and still have that really important public comment and public idea and input that makes West Hartford great. Thank you so much for allowing me this time.
Thank you. Next, we have Mark Walsh.
Hello, Mark Walsh, 33 Huckleberry Lane. God has blessed me again by following these two speakers because this is going to be very uncomfortable, people. I came here before you before, and I told you that I found out on August 22nd, I heard a phone call on the radio regarding a student who attempted suicide. 11 days later, that student died. I made inquiries to a lot of officials, elected and appointed, and nobody got back to me. I emailed everybody. You know, you always hear these sayings from the officials. Call me anytime. My door is always open. You got a seat at the table. Email me. I did. I emailed everybody from Lorna to the chief of police to the school superintendent. The only person who got back to me was Dallas Dodge, the town attorney. And let me tell you something. I do speak attorney. And what he said was, shut up. There's nothing to look here. Go away. And I'm not. So the only thing I could find, it was funny too, the only thing I could find on that very day was in the local paper. It said that this was a medical issue. This isn't a medical issue. A student committing suicide? This is a public health issue. This is a crisis in our community that people try to hide. And shame on those who participated in that ruse. And so, you know, after trying to email, I did have a few officials willing to talk to me. One told me that they were running for office and that they didn't want to interfere with her attempt to climb to a higher position. Unacceptable. Another one told me I came across as a lunatic or a conspiracy theorist. You know, that didn't fly well. And of course, Derek Slapp is the best. He said he's going to pick a different public outlet to, you know, comment on. I'm the public. Derek Slapp, if you're watching, I'm the public. Make a comment to me. So anyway, here's where it gets uncomfortable. It took me a while to get the police report of what happened to that student. In this report are words bully, bullying, suicide, suicide pact, suicidal are scattered everywhere. Students encouraging others to kill themselves utilizing Snapchat and TikTok. These kids are 11, 12, and 13. I mean, come on. How is nobody crying from a mountaintop? Shame on the people who knew about it. Nobody stood up and said, hey, time out. We got a problem here. I don't want to blame one person, but there were many red flags. And, I don't even understand. Our own CDC, it's kind of funny. The West Hartford officials who inundated my phone with following their instructions faithfully even says suicide prevention requires a comprehensive public health approach and postvention. Look that one up if you can't figure it out. Our own CDC says it. And you people don't want to follow it. You don't even want to think about it. So I'll leave you with this. I witnessed in our town a couple of times, I saw hundreds of people, including all our public officials. They knelt for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, a couple of times in 2020 on June. I want everybody to find a quiet place, whether it's your own restroom at your house. I want you to sit in here for 11 minutes and 39 seconds.
Excuse me, your time has expired.
And that represents what that Bristol Middle School student did in that bathroom.
Your time has
11
expired.
minutes.
Excuse me, sir, your time has expired. Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have Addie Lorden.
Good evening. My name is Addie Lorden. I live at 561 Park Road in West Hartford in Connecticut, obviously. After that speech, it's very emotional, so please forgive me. I'm here to speak on policy. We had a subcommittee who met and convened several times speaking about communications 8355. And then we have the policies that were discussed that have been given down by Connecticut, state and federal. Communication is a theme throughout both. And communication with parents and collaboration is trotted out constantly. There was a meeting on Wednesday for the subcommittee at 9 a.m. The agenda went up the day before. Surprisingly, after it was pointed out that these agendas need to be put up 24 hours in advance, not a few minutes or a couple of hours before they meet. The agenda never stated that this was to be a virtual meeting only. It also did not give any phone numbers for the public to attend over their cell phones or in their office. I arrived shortly before 9 a.m. and was informed that this meeting was only virtual and I could join virtually, which I attempted to do on my cell phone. I waited patiently. I was told nobody is letting you into, on a little screen, you are not being let into this meeting. I complained. I was told that this was only a virtual meeting. And then I went to see if I could get any paperwork. I was told there was no paperwork available for this meeting. I asked about policies. I was told the policy book was in the hands of Shipman and Goodwin. I find that this is discriminatory towards me. I emailed the entire board and Lorna Farquharson. You have never responded to one email I have sent you. This is discrimination. Parents have the right to speak. We have the right to our opinions. I do not care about your philosophies, your ideologies. I don't care which political party you are on. I don't care. I come to you with problems. I expect that they are listened to. I expect that my time is as valuable as yours. You've proven it isn't. That's wrong. And it's wrong for these young people to see that their parents are not listened to when they come to you. My father brought me up to believe in the goodness of people and their integrity. I am sorely disappointed.
Thank you. Next we have David Johnston or Johnson.
Good evening. I'm David Johnston. I'm a 42-year resident of West Hartford, and I was the director of the Bridge 20 years ago, and I have been a substitute teacher in West Hartford for 10 years. and I've been in just about every school in town, and I've been slowly accumulating a list of issues that I want to talk to you about. I'll only be able to touch on a couple of those. I'll leave you with a summary of my more complete thoughts on 8 different issues. I'll read you the issues and then just make a couple of comments on them. Social media, life in the schools, sexual harassment and assault, substance abuse, non-traditional jobs and careers, school start times, global warming, and a gap year. And those are big issues, and again, I'm happy to, in fact, there are 10 copies of that. I'm happy to share. Social media, we all know some of the issues that exist out there. It's an addiction. I was in a 9th grade class today at one of our high schools, and cell phone use is rampant. It's role modeled by parents, and it's something as a society that we are, I think, in trouble with this, and we need to take a closer look at it. There's a lot of research on the negative effects. One of the effects that's very clear, I think, to most teachers over many years is the impact on reading and writing. I had a 9th grade honors English student today at Conard High School tell me he didn't like to read, and furthermore, he didn't like to read books. And for somebody my age, it was like, a scary piece. And I've heard that many, many times. And social media are partly to blame for that, but I think we have to take a closer look at that in a school setting. There's a lot of research on the relationship between the advent of social media and smartphones and difficult behavior. The gentleman referred to bullying, to suicidal thoughts, to depression, to loneliness. Those trends on the National Teen Survey started up at exactly the same time that smartphones were introduced, and I don't think it's an accident. So that's social media. There's a lot more there. Parents are clearly responsible, but I think educators can work on this as well in a variety of ways. Instant access to anything and everything online puts too much mature content into the hands of immature youth. Secrets abound. And teenagers, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure this has been the case since my kids were teenagers. 4 of them who graduated from Hall High School went on to college, went on to life. 2 of them are teachers now, have told me that the secrets abound, and kids are not always willing to tell their parents everything that they're doing. Life in the schools, we have a lot of good teachers in West Hartford. I have been in almost every school, probably more in middle school than anywhere else. I happen to prefer middle school kids over other age kids. I know that sounds crazy, but that's just me. And the teachers are under stress right now, and I've talked to many. They're feeling very stressed. Okay. So the whole summary is in there. Enjoy. And I'd be happy to talk to any of you about it in more detail.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to make a public comment? And one thing I neglected to share at the start is that we have 3 minutes per person, but 21 minutes per subject matter. We have not reached that cap just yet, but do want to make sure to share that with you. Is there anyone? I saw a hand raised. Yes, please come to the podium, share your name and address, please.
Oh, good evening. Hi. Matt Masunas, M-A-C-U-N-A-S, 62 Grove Street. So I'm excited to become a BOE stakeholder moving forward as my 4-year-old next year transitions into public busing for kindergarten. So finally, I can enjoy the enjoyment that everyone finds here. And so I'm also a policy expert at transportation electrification. And so I'm here to underline the correspondence that I sent to board members earlier this evening, or rather this afternoon, on an issue that is a passion of mine, and that's school bus electrification and alternative fuel school buses, free of the sorts of diesel emissions, the carbon dioxide, the nitrogen oxide, the heavy particulate matter that's so injurious to the lungs and the public health of those around diesel buses in their course of operation, especially students. in the last 6 months alone, and this is what's most important, I think, for the board to be considering, the policy environment for alternative fuel school buses has been completely upended at both the federal level and the state level. Administrations recognizing both the public health and climate benefits of removing diesel emissions, as well as the economic need to create cost parity so that they're not overburdening those school districts that are adopting alternative fuel vehicles. And so massive amounts of grants are now available at the federal level with the Clean School Bus Program, up to competitive grants up to $2.5 billion for electric alone, and then the remainder for alternative fuel vehicles, and then also longer contracting terms that the state has now allowed as well, from 5 years to 10 years now for service contracts that include at least one, I see the yellow card, electric school bus. And so with my understanding that the RFP for transportation services is cycling in the coming year, between maybe now and a year from now. It seems like the perfect time to be thinking about this for the adoption and integration of alternative fuel buses into the fleet, because it's going to take the service technicians, the service providers, time to adapt to that, to begin moving them into the fleet, for the staging area to be properly determined by the existing vendor, the new vendor, so on and so forth. So I forgot to mention the state has also established a hard target. By 2035, all alternative fuel school buses must be in operation. By 2040, all electric school buses must be in operation. No more diesel buses at all by that point. My time is up. But with RFP cycles few and far between, when it comes to this, it would make sense for this upcoming year to be starting to consider that. And I'm happy to be a resource if you like. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to make a public comment? I'll ask one more time. All right, thank you. We'll pause on public comments. Again, we do have an opportunity at the end of the meeting as well. Now we will go to our non-staff communications and reports. Hello? Hello? The light is red. Hello? Thank you, whoever is alerted to that. Hello? I will try to project my voice all the more. Thank you. And so where we are now is with staff communications and reports. This is where we're able to hear from our student representatives. And so we first will hear from Amira, who is representing Caitlin, but we're glad to have Amira here. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Amira. I'm representing Caitlin from Hall High School, and I would just like to share some of our Hall highlights, interesting things that are going on at Hall. Oh, yeah, sorry. Is this a little better? This better? Not working? Hello? Is it better? I'll just project my voice. Sorry, everyone. So last week, Coach Frank Robinson was named the Jets Coach of the Week. He was recognized at Robert Saleh, I don't think I said that correctly, press conference last Thursday sporting a Hall Titans t-shirt. So very exciting. The Hall's Black Box Theater will be hosting a Comedy of Errors next week. From Thursdays to Saturday, tickets are still available and all are invited to attend. They're $5 for students and $10 for adults. Hall has begun the process of reaccrediting through the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. We have started the self-reflection process with surveys going out to families, staff, and students. Students will be taking the survey on October 26th. This Saturday, Hall will be hosting our annual homecoming dance. It will take place in the cafeteria from 7 to 10 p.m., and we expect to have a sellout of 400 students in attendance. And in preparation for homecoming, Hall students have put together a Spirit Day. For the rest of this week, we, in addition to the Spirit Days we already had, which is Sports Day and Adam Sandler Day, which is basically just dress down day. The rest of the week, tomorrow, we're having a Pink Out Day for cancer awareness, a Twin Day this Thursday, and a School Colors Day where you wear the colors that correspond with your matching class. And those are just some of our highlights. Thank you.
Amira, thank you for Hall's updates. Now we'll hear from Megan in regard to Conard.
Good evening, everyone. So at the last meeting, I touched on how some Conard students in Hall and 10 other schools were going to visit the JCC for a viewing of The Rescuers, which was a movie about the Rwandan genocide directed by Michael King. And just an update on that, they actually had the opportunity to attend a Q&A interview with him where they got to debrief on their thoughts post-viewing that movie, which was a great opportunity. Also, the Equity Squad's Leadership Institute is planning to meet at the end of October, so exciting updates to come on that. Regarding athletics, our girls swim and dive team remains undefeated. They're our only team undefeated, but all of our teams have been reaching a lot of success in their respective competitions. A lot of them have been hosting Pink Out games for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. For example, volleyball held an away game at Simsbury last night where they had a Pink Out theme. Boys soccer is actually having Pink Out tonight. Field hockey did a bake sale and raised, I think, $700 for breast cancer awareness. And soccer actually had a dedicated night to former coach Carrie Massaro, where all of the money went to her Memorial Scholarship Fund. So all teams have been super successful in that respect. The College Career Center has been super busy with college visits. Representatives have been continuing to come in every day. And actually tomorrow there's a college fair that will be held at Conard. There's so many schools that are coming, and it's a great opportunity for our students to meet the people who will be reviewing their admissions. 10th and 11th graders last week took the PSAT. And also we had a Say Something week where in communities we had a whole week themed with each day a different theme, such as say hi to 3 new people, or wear green, or sit with someone new at lunch, make some new faces, meet some new faces. But we had an assembly that Wednesday in our community period where we watched a Sandy Hook Promise virtual assembly. So everyone had the opportunity to see that. And lastly, the Black Box recently put on 3 showings of the production Clue, which I did not get to see, but I heard it was super successful.
All right, thank you, Megan, for Conard's update. Now we will, according to the revised agenda, go to our staff communications and reports, Part B, in particular staff reports and board discussions, where we will receive information regarding our post-secondary transition program report. So if we have those individuals, please come to the table. We welcome Miss Melissa Caballera and some other wonderful teammates here. So passing it to you all.
Good evening, everyone. I do have some special guests with me. I don't think our microphones are working either. Can you hear me okay? Yep. Okay. All right, let me see. And while I'm loading up the presentation, can I ask our students to introduce themselves and tell everybody your name? Nice and loud.
I'm Jack.
Go ahead.
I'm Isabel.
Thank you. And I'm Weller.
I don't think they're working.
Can you hear better now? Oh, thank you.
Oh, good. All right. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about our post-secondary transition program this evening. We are a growing bunch, and we have come so far since 2015, where we were previously at the Wampanoag school site, and as you know, we've since transitioned to the Cogswell site, and I'll tell you more about our expansion. But this is a really great opportunity for us to look back at where we've been over the past few years. We were, I think, 20-ish students in 2015, and now we find ourselves with a growing number of students in a really expanded, beautiful program that I'm so proud of, and I'm happy to have our students here to share some firsthand experiences about their time in our transition program. So let me tell you a little bit about what transition is. So under IDEA, we are required to provide students a free and appropriate education that addresses their specialized learning needs through special education related services. And it also addresses their ability to become, access future education, independent employment, and independent living. And so we talk about transition as a coordinated set of activities that supports a student with a disability to focus on that school to post-school support. And it addresses everything from their access to post-secondary education, vocational training, supported and integrated employment opportunities, continuing adult education, access to adult services, independent living, and participation and meaningful participation in our community. And in addition to the federal law IDEA, we actually have state statutes in the state of Connecticut that went into effect. We've always had some that required transition to be planned at a much earlier age, but in 2021, July of 2021, it went into effect that as a student turns 13 before their 14th birthday, we're actually having those conversations then about future transitions. So we begin planning at that time, which is really quite young. And so to make sure that we're capturing a student's input, where they see themselves, we have those conversations annually. We use a series of coordinated evaluations, whether it's a specialized transition evaluation or a student self-determination evaluation. We take input from our students, their parents, and our caregivers where they see their students going in the future. But it really helps us understand their individual needs, their strengths, their interests, and their preferences. And we actually, because it starts so young, we actually have a transition coordinator aside from the program we'll talk about this evening. We have a transition coordinator at the middle school and high school level that supports those activities after a student has turned 14 and works on those skills all the way up through the end of high school. And once a student has met the academic requirements in the high school setting, we look at eligibility for a transition-only program. And we have core transition skills that we look at to determine if a student requires the assistance of that transition program that works solely on those transition skills. Do you know that girl? I think I know her. So we have, as I said, we've continued. It's you. Oh my gosh, you were right up on that big screen. We are so proud of the program that we have grown over the years. So as I shared, we were used to be at the Wampanoag site, and we had moved to the Cogswell site. And as our program has continued to grow, we've required more classrooms. So this school year, we actually, in addition to 3 classrooms at our Cogswell site that's located on the American School for the Deaf campus, we actually have 2 classrooms located here in Town Hall that are more community-based. And we have a total of 53 students who are in our program right now. Interesting fact about our post-secondary program, because students age out as they turn 22, it's our only program aside from move-ins that our enrollment will decrease as the year goes on as students age out of the program and exit us. We are supported by 5 special education teachers. We have a transition coordinator that's separate and solely responsible for our transition program. We do have a culinary training coordinator, and we have related services within the program. And then we have adult support staff, job coaches, our paraeducators, and our teaching assistants. And we're also very fortunate, in addition to accessing public transportation to get to all of our many job sites across the community, that we actually have 2 of our own vans and 2 van drivers who support our program, so we can have more individualized transportation to our sites that we're using for our transition activities. And so it is a really robust program, and as I said, within the 53 students, we're just seeing a change in our population. We're seeing a wider continuum of students who will access gainful employment in very competitive marketplace and who are going to post-secondary education. And then we also have students who have more significant needs who will be supported by DDS upon exit from the program as they exit those services. But let me turn it over to my colleague, Rhonda Merriman, who's going to tell you a little bit more about our current job sites, our programs, how students are supported in our post-secondary transition program.
Department Supervisor for Strive and Post-Secondary. So tonight we're just talking about post-secondary. So we presently have approximately 18 community sites that we have students working in. One of the things that we've experienced, better? Thank you. Better, okay. Okay, thank you. One of the things that we experienced during the pandemic was really a reduction, obviously, in our community sites. And so what's happened in the couple of years since the full force of the pandemic is we have been regaining some of our community partners, and there have been a couple of changes. One, in fact, has been that sites that previously might be able to accommodate maybe up to 4 students with one job coach now is looking to reduce the number of students that they can accommodate for a variety of reasons. Trying to keep distance, still provide for distancing and safety, as well as the fact that some of them are trying to hire their own employees, right? And so they're trying to give whatever work opportunities there are to other individuals who need jobs. And then also, finally, there just isn't quite as much work. So there's a combination of factors. However, we have been growing, and this year we're seeing a number of sites. In fact, we've acquired several new sites. So there are approximately 18 sites, and we find ourselves working across our community as well as other communities. So we have students that go as far as the Berlin Turnpike and work at Outback and Chick-fil-A. We have students working in Plainville at, oh my gosh, it's Progressive, I think it's a glass company. So that site. We have people for a number of years. We've had students working at the Yukon Accounts Payable Department, as well as doctor's offices, legal offices, a variety of retail outlets. This year we have students working at Michael's, right over by the mall, and we have students working at a variety of other places, as well as within our own community. In addition to that, we have students who are working in some of our schools, in the kitchens, oftentimes washing dishes, kind of getting things ready, getting meals ready, getting the items ready for snacks, bagging lunches, things like that. We also have job sites. We have a relationship with Our Farm, which is in the northwest corner of town on the Bloomfield line. We've had that relationship for a number of years, and it's changed over the years. But we have a what is it called? A high tunnel? High tunnel. It's a greenhouse. And our students were very involved in building that particular tunnel, and we do plant and harvest crops, as well as do a lot of other work around the farm. Some work with the animals, but there's a lot of cleanup, moving brush, doing different kinds of things. And then we bring those crops, they harvest the crops, and we bring them back. And we use them in our culinary center for preparing meals and things like that. We've been really fortunate to have the Next Chapter bookstore, and we are eternally grateful, I have to say, for that and the vans. I will say, thank you for the vans. Didn't want to forget that. We're very, very grateful for the vans. But the Next Chapter bookstore has been a huge success, and I know you're all very familiar with that. And we have students who work there. In addition, what not everybody really knows about is that there's a lot of background work. So in addition to the bookstore, we have an additional site on campus at the Cogswell building on the campus of American School for the Deaf, where students sort the books. So all of our book donations come into Cogswell. It's scheduled through the bookstore, through the email address for the bookstore. The donations come in, and then we have a room that is chock full of books. And there the students sort the books. They categorize them by genre. Sometimes they categorize them by author. We have students who do all of the data entry, because we have a spreadsheet of all of our books. And so it's cataloged and it's very organized, so that when Miss Nancy, our bookstore manager, needs a certain author, or she's running low on children's books or adolescent, kind of readers, she calls for books, and then our students go and deliver those books. So it's really quite a system. I mean, it's quite an enterprise, really, and there are many layers. So that we do have some students who aren't necessarily prepared or ready to maybe work at the bookstore, but there's all this background work. So, our motto is every job is important, every job. And so even when it comes to our culinary program that we have on site, students work there preparing the treats and the snacks that are sold at the bookstore. So that, we have dog treats that we make, and human treats and all different kinds of things that are sold at the bookstore. And so that's another kind of aspect of that. And so people are really busy. I want to say, where else are we? In addition, let's see. We also, during the period of COVID, and I think this is very important, we obviously didn't shut down completely, but we had to really change. We had to pivot like everybody else had to do. And so one of the things that we, the teachers really were investigating and became very active in terms of doing was writing grants. And we have been very blessed by our own West Hartford Foundation, and we've been very fortunate to receive funds every year, frankly. We've been very, very fortunate. And with that money, they developed an in-house, I don't know if we really have a picture of it, but on our site in Cogswell, we have an in-house vocational program now that is really quite developed. So it started out with a lot of, we purchased boxes for kind of practice work, piecework, more manufacturing types of things that some of our students may find themselves doing when they transition to group-supported employment as young adults. So we kind of started there, but then we actively searched for other opportunities and really went to our community partners so that we now have relationships with restaurants in town. We've gone so far as Hartford. There's this coffee shop in Hartford, and we stamp all of their cups. So we have these, kind of relationships, business relationships now, where we put the bags together for the food pantry. So all the food pantry bags that anybody sees are kind of organized. Is that one of your jobs? Have you done that job? You do a good job. I saw you the other day. You do a fantastic job. Yeah. So our students put together those bags, and then they're organized, and then they're delivered back to the food pantry, and then we get more. We do the same thing with Bird Code. We stamp all of their takeout bags. So if you've ever...
I do that too.
You do that one too. I'm sure you did, right? So if you have takeout, you've probably seen, examples of our work. And those are real jobs. So that, again, every link in the chain, right, is so very important. And we tell our students, because some of our students really want to do some other kinds of jobs, and we say, it's all part of the system and part of the team. Very busy, and frankly, we've been very blessed. People work incredibly hard, but we've been incredibly blessed. I'm thinking back. I think we moved to Cogswell in the fall of 2017. It was Columbus Day weekend, right? Andy remembers.
We moved in 24 hours, if I remember.
In 24 hours, you better believe it, right? And so. And things are really moving along there. The culinary program is also really exciting. We do have 2 kitchens on site. So we have your typical kitchen. It's large, but it's kind of looks like a kitchen you would see in a high school. And so that's the kitchen where we often work with students, teachers, and students work to develop a menu. They then go shopping for the items they need at Big Y. That's one trip, and then they come back and they cook. What did you make today?
I made hot dogs today.
You did?
Yeah.
Excellent. Was that for lunch?
Yeah.
Nice job. What did you make today?
I made the turkey burger.
You made a turkey burger. Did you cook today?
No.
Jack? Not today. Okay.
No,
all right.
I cook on Monday.
What did you make yesterday?
Hot dog.
Well, there you go. Okay. So every day a different group is involved in the kitchen with their teachers and their staff, and they determine what the menu is going to be and what they're going to cook. But we also have an industrial kitchen on site in part of our building, and we do have a culinary training coordinator, and that's where students have been involved in ServSafe, or is it Safe Serve? ServSafe? I think it's ServSafe, right? ServSafe classes for students who are interested in maybe pursuing work in the culinary field, as well as just doing things on a larger scale. So let us know if you're interested in any treats.
I'm wondering if our students can share a little bit. Maybe Jack, do you want to tell everybody some things that you've learned at school?
Learn about, I don't know. Any ideas?
Yeah, what about at the bookstore?
Yeah, the books.
Tell us about the bookstore a little bit. Maybe tell everybody some things that you do at the bookstore.
I'm not sure.
You're not sure? I bet Weller can help you out. Weller, what are some things you do at the bookstore?
I straighten the shelves and
Yeah.
I assist customers.
Tell us a little bit about assisting customers. Is that easy or hard?
It's easy.
It's easy. Was it always easy?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us some things that you have to help customers with.
I asked them if they want a receipt or a bag.
It's very good.
And what might be a question that a customer might ask you when they come in the bookstore?
No.
So I might come in the bookstore and I might say, excuse me, do you know where... What kinds of books might I ask for? Hardcover. So we got lots of hardcover books. What's one of the most popular areas is what kind of books? The
children's?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes, yes. The children's books. We're always replacing children's books and looking for donations, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very busy place. Jack, I was just wondering, what was where did you go to work today?
Burlington.
You went to Burlington. What do you do? Burlington, what's the rest of the name? It's Burlington. Yes, and what did you do there today?
I make sure all the shoes were put away.
Perfect.
For all the customers.
Right, and does that get frustrating because sometimes they don't leave it very neat, right?
No.
No, I know. It's pain. I know, it's pain.
Very waste of time.
A waste of time? I agree. Thank you. Thank you for being so honest. I appreciate that, yes. So some of the jobs, as you well know, can be pretty tedious, right? And so it's really exciting when our students come back and tell us that, I don't know why the shoes aren't where they're supposed to be, or there were socks in the shoe department, right? Sometimes. Yeah. Excellent. Great.
Isabel, what's your favorite part about school and Miss White's class? What do you like to do?
The cooking.
You like the cooking? What did you make yesterday? What were you baking this week? Do you remember?
I can't remember.
Was it biscotti?
I was baking biscotti.
Biscotti. Very good. Very good. Jack, are there any other things that you could think about? Where else do you work besides Burlington?
CVS.
And what do you do at CVS?
Make sure all the shelves are put away.
Yes. Is that less frustrating than the shoes?
Yes.
Which one do you like better?
CVS, it's a simple, old-fashioned job.
All right. Isabel, is there anything else you want to share about school with everyone? What else do you like besides cooking?
Hanging with people.
Yes.
Being with people, socializing. She told us.
That's what she told us. Are you happy in your new school? You're new to our school this year.
Yeah.
Right? So Isabel moved to West Hartford this year, and so she is new to us. So are you happy?
I am happy.
I'm glad you're happy. And have you made new friends?
I have.
Good. I'm glad. We're glad you're here.
Weller, I was noticing the shirt you're wearing. Can you tell everybody why you're wearing that shirt? It's an important shirt.
Because on two Tuesdays ago, there was an anniversary at the bookstore.
How old is the bookstore?
1 year old.
Wow, very good. We had our first anniversary, right?
Yeah.
Very nice. All right. So we'll turn it over to you all. If you have any questions for myself or Rhonda or students, we're certainly happy to answer those for you.
Thank you so much. All right, teammates, questions or comments? Yes, Claire.
I wanted to thank all of you for coming. I know it can be nervous to come, but we're really glad to see some students. And thank you also for the cookies you brought. I did get a chance to visit Cogswell about 3 years ago, and I can't wait to see what it's done. It was right after you guys had moved in. It's a very important part of West Hartford Public Schools, and it's something that most people don't know about. Our kids go to school with kids with all varying disabilities, and they see them in class, and that transition from school into their new life. And at 22, there isn't much support. So what you offer in those years is so important, and the skills you give, and the lack of social isolation that they might face. Many of these students will not go to a four-year college. These students want to work and contribute. They want to live alone, and the skills that you give are just amazing. So thank you for the work that you do, and thank you, students, for coming.
Thank you. I think if I can just add, I think one of the most important things we do is our work with parents and families, because I think there's a lot of support and a lot of, the flurry around going from birth to three to three, right? And going into pre-K. And there are supports there. And parents are often, very active in terms of their work together. This is also a transition, like that transition. In some ways, this is much bigger. Because as all parents know, when your students leave high school, that's a really remarkable time in your life as a parent, sending your child off to college, and then certainly beyond that. Our parents do that, our community of parents do that with these students. And I think some parents, it can be an isolating time because your student is a young adult, and it's a little bit, sometimes you're unsure of what's coming next. And so we really pride ourselves on working really closely with our families to help them plan for that next step, whether it be going to the Department of Developmental Services for support for some of our people that are going to be in adult-supported programs, as well as going to the Bureau of Rehabilitation Services for other students, and frankly, even DEMIS for mental health supports for some students. So that's also an important part, and I always think that's an important part to kind of highlight for people.
Yeah, thank you, Rhonda. I'm going to add on to that too and just say that we are continually looking at our vertical alignment of that so that families starting even in elementary school are getting the information about different agencies. We know there's some wait times. We provide parent workshop series, and last year we covered some really important topics broadly on transition. We talked about guardianship and conservatorship, which are topics that families at this age sometimes need to think about and consider, and it's very confusing and overwhelming. But we are constantly having those dialogue with our parents and our caregivers, and we partner very closely with them, as Rhonda shared. And we'll continue to have series like that that are open to all families, not just our post-secondary, so I will put that out there to all families who might be interested in learning some more about planning and transition, and even post-secondary education where we don't implement IEPs, but they are able to implement accommodations. And I think it's just important for families to be knowledgeable about what services are available to their child as they transition from school to post-school life and activities.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Jason?
All right, thank you for the presentation. Jack, Isabella, Weller, hearing about your day was the best part of my day. Thank you. Thank you so much. I wanted to, two questions. One is, does your program have a peer mentoring component to speak to younger children who are coming up into the transition, and if there's ways, I'm just curious in the ways that the program can inform itself from the graduates from the program.
I think we may have done that in the past. I think with COVID we have not, but I do know that Neil Cummings is the transition coordinator at the high schools, and Neil and our transition coordinator have worked very actively together so that we would visit, our graduates or our students would visit the high schools. That hasn't happened, and that hopefully is something that we can return to. Our students know a lot of the students, and they know, the high school students know our students, and our students are also, many of them also continue in Unified Theater.
Oh, cool.
Okay, so it's interesting because our students are adults.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think our students want to make that transition from high school, so not in high school anymore, right? And so it's a little bit different, but yeah, there's that communication. But that is important, you're right, for it to go back and talk to the students that are then coming up about what it means. We usually do some of those visits in the spring.
I see, yep. Interesting. Yeah, thank you. And the other one is, I'm so curious how an employer becomes a site for the program.
So the transition coordinator is the person primarily who investigates different sites.
I see.
And I know Beth had indicated this summer she had business cards and she was going up and down the Berlin Turnpike. So that could be a little questionable, but just be careful. And so she was visiting
Right.
all of the restaurants and different places. Certain sites, there are some corporate restrictions, it appears. So a couple of places that are chain stores that we have investigated over the past several years, you're referred to corporate, the corporate offices, and sometimes they're a yay or a nay. And I'm not sure how that, I don't really understand that piece of it, honestly, but we're still knocking on doors.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we have a lot of opportunity right in our own community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, it's just kind of getting back. In the past, we've had students working at Marshall's and TJ Maxx. We've had students working at Big Y. We've had students working, at a lot of different places.
We've had students working at the state offices as
State
well, and so
offices,
that's
yes, the
certainly
Attorney
something that
General's
we
office.
continue to always branch out. I think it helps having now also our classrooms here in
Yeah.
the town hall.
Yep.
And that it creates lots of opportunities both in the town offices and in this area as well.
Correct.
And I talked to our transition coordinator just today, and one of the greatest things about our employment opportunities that we have for our students is that oftentimes our students are actually hired through those companies, directly. So they're guaranteed the employment, and I think that's really nice. She does continue to look for vocational sites. We do like to hear from our students what their interests are, so that we can also support them in pursuing what they prefer. So that those sites align with their interests and what they want for themselves.
Thank you, guys.
Other questions or comments? Gayle?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Glad you all came to speak to us. I had a question about whether or not, are the students being compensated while they're doing these jobs?
So we have a program it's a stipend program. So we do have a stipend that we receive, it's part of our budget, and students receive a stipend on a weekly basis, and the money is recycled. So it's not a paycheck where they kind of own the paycheck, so to speak, but they use that money, and you go to the bank, right?
Yeah,
And what do you do with the bank?
cash my check.
Cash your check, and then what do you typically do? What do you do with the money once you cash your check?
I get the money for working.
Okay, for working. Do you deposit any of the money in a savings account or a checking account? I think a checking maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, they deposit their money and then they may keep some of the money and then they use that money then for the activities. So that then there's no cost to the families for activities. So if they go to lunch, they have money to go to lunch. If they're going to a museum, if they're going to a park, those kinds of things. So bowling, right?
Yeah.
You use your money to go bowling.
Mm-hmm.
What else might you use the money to go? Jack, have you ever used your money for a trip?
I don't know.
Maybe you'd go to the movies,
Yeah, movie.
right? Maybe they go to the movies. So they use that money. So it kind of recycles itself.
I just had one other question. And I know this, is probably a little bit tricky, but can you give us some idea of how many students graduate the program and then are, let's say, employed by one of these sites? I'm assuming that, it probably varies on a yearly kind of basis, but.
I don't know if I have those statistics handy about how many are employed by sites per se, and I would say because one of the things that makes it more challenging is we don't have a conclusion to our year, like the typical graduation of 12th grade, all of our students exiting at one point in time. Students gradually exit across the year as they turn 22. So it's a more gradual exit from the program, or if they meet their transition needs in advance of the age of 22. And so I don't know exactly what those statistics are, but hearing from my transition coordinator today, I think she was really happy with the employment rates within our job sites, which was nice to hear.
Other questions, comments? Ethan?
I don't know if this clarifies or just confuses. In the printout or the write-up, it said 18 jobs were secured. If somebody secures a job, would that graduate them, or is it?
So those are our
Database.
sites.
Say again?
So we have approximately 18 sites where students work. So not
Okay,
all
I
of-
thought it said job sites. Okay. Yeah, got it.
Oh, I apologize.
No,
I
no,
guess-
you're right. It's job
So job
sites.
sites would be sites where our students are working as part of the
Okay.
program. Those are our partners,
Mhm.
I guess, our vocational partners, so I apologize if that's not clear. I think we have had students, I don't, again, like Melissa said, I don't necessarily have the exact numbers. I do know, for example, though, last year we had a student working at Middlewoods who did become employed, who was offered a full-time job, and even started working before he left us, frankly, before he graduated. And then we have, and some employers, you know, they'll let us know, they'll say, you know, we're really interested in so-and-so, they're such a good worker. We think that as they get closer to being ready to exit the program.
So
we
it's
can-
age-driven, the process. Okay.
Yeah, so we have that opportunity. I came here to go to Whole Foods, and a former student is working at Whole Foods. I saw him there this weekend. So, and they come back and visit, so people will reach out to some of the teachers and say, hey, I have a job here, I have a job there. So, again, I think prior to the pandemic, there were more opportunities, just, you know, and so we're beginning to hear from people again.
Yes, Claire. Can you speak briefly to the students who go into the transition program don't necessarily meet the academic requirements that the general population meets? And so their certificate at high school graduation and then at transition 22, what does that look like, or how does that work?
I'm going to have Rhonda, yeah.
So all of our students all of our students in West Hartford do complete all of the academic requirements. So that there may be modified courses, they may be accommodated, and certainly they may be modified, but they do complete all of the academic requirements to earn a West Hartford High School diploma, whether it be at Conard or Hall. Upon leaving the high school, they are unable to take that diploma because if you receive a regular high school diploma, you're no longer eligible for special education under the IDEA. So the students receive a certificate at the time that they finish high school, and they can participate in all graduation activities. So they walk in graduation, they get the box, they get the thing with the paper in it, like everybody else does, right? So they do that, they go to prom, they go to the all-night party, all of the activities they're entitled to participate in. When they exit our program, and again, it's different for different people. So if students are eligible for services from the Department of Developmental Services, they generally stay with us inclusive of their 21st year. So they're eligible until the day before their 22nd birthday. And then they exit. They used to all exit at the end of the year. They don't anymore. They all exited. They have their own party. They have their own parties now. So everybody, right? We had somebody exit just this week, I think, one of our students, and we have a couple coming up in near future. And so that's when they receive their high school diploma, and the high school diploma indicates the month and year that they're leaving our program. And they understand that that's when they're graduating, and that they've already walked, and that's fine, and then they go on their way. So our students all do. It's not that way necessarily in a lot of places, but it is here. And they do complete all the courses. So we have transcripts, we see their transcripts, and we make sure that all the courses have been taken. And the high school counselors obviously are involved in planning for their programs in high school.
Deb and then Jason.
Thank you, and I want to thank you all for coming and sharing about your days with us as well. And Jack, I totally feel you because my first job also was working in a shoe store, and I totally understand how sometimes people aren't respectful about putting things back where they're supposed to be. I was hoping that that Weller and Isabel and Jack, you could share with us, when you think about your future in the next couple of years, what are some things that you hope for, and how can we, as your Board of Education and in this program, help you get there?
I have no idea yet.
That's okay. I'm not sure yet either what the next few years hold.
You want to think about
It's
it?
a bit early.
It is early. It is early, but it doesn't have to be work related. It can be anything that you're thinking
No, I'm not
about.
sure.
Okay.
What about you, Isabel? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? You're not sure?
I haven't gotten to that part.
You can keep making these cookies because they're so good, and I might be the only one who's broken into my cookie bag, but.
Do you think about what kind of work you might like to do?
Maybe doing the shoes.
You think maybe the shoes? Do you think you'd like to work with a lot of people, or do you want to work in a place that's quiet? What do you think?
With a what?
I knew it was going to be that. I knew it. It wasn't going to be the quiet place. So those are the kinds of questions we ask. You know, do you like a lot of people? Do you like this? Would you like to work out with a team of people? Do you like working alone? Because we have some students that prefer to work alone. How about you? Do you have an answer for that question?
No.
No? Think about what kind of work do you think you might like to do? Because you've been in our program for how many years now?
4.
4. This is your 4th year, right?
Yeah.
So you've done lots of different kinds of
Yeah.
jobs. What did you like the best?
I like the bookstore.
Good. So that involves doing what? Working with?
Helping with the books.
Right. And working with people, right? Yeah. So I think you'd probably like a job where you had more social kinds of things to do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. So I know that we used some of our ESSER money to start the next chapter bookstore. And I'm wondering if other parts of the program, including staff, are also supported by ESSER money, or are these are regular budget items? Okay, good.
Yeah, these are regular budget items. In the budget, the board actually did expand the program for us to add that 5th teacher this year, given our growing numbers and our population. I'm not aware of anything outside of the bookstore that was funded with ESSER money. The rest is part of our permanent programming that supports our students through the transition years.
Very good.
Other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you so much, Isabel, Jack, and Willard. We are so proud of you. And to hear about your baking skills and your customer service skills and your organizational skills, so proud of you. But I have a very important question. You listening?
Yeah.
Are you proud of yourself?
Yeah.
I am.
Yes. That is so important. Well, thank you so much for coming here, sitting at that table. You did a better job than some adults. Oh, boy, we are impressed with you.
Oh, boy.
Thank you so much. And, of course, Melissa and Rhonda, thank you so very much. Thank you.
Very much.
All right, and we are going to continue now to receive information regarding our state assessment results, literacy, mathematics, and science. We're going to have Mr. Paul Vicinas, Ms. Carrie Jones, and Dr. Michelle Graveline to come to the table to report. So hello and thank you, and passing it to you.
Good evening, and thank you for opportunity to present our 2022 state assessment results. Bear with me. And it is a pleasure to be joined by my colleagues. You know, everyone knows Carrie Jones. I trust you know Dr. Michelle Graveline.
Mr. Vicinas, just one moment. We're still resonating in the excitement from the previous
Absolutely.
presentation. We'll just give just a moment for things just to settle down before we continue on. We are just so excited to hear how our young people are doing. Definitely excitement worthy of that. And as we settle down, yes, we look forward to hearing your report. Thank you so very much. All right. And passing it back to you.
Well, thank you again. And as I was saying, just very happy to introduce publicly Dr. Michelle Graveline, who is our Interim Director of Secondary Education. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is your first presentation with us here at the board table in this capacity. Carrie Jones, a longtime friend of the board, you know her. And tonight it's a privilege to talk about our 2022 state assessment results in grades 3 through 8, where students annually are tested for their performance and grade level expectations in mathematics and literacy, and then also in grades 5, 8, and 11 in their performance in science. And just some quick background information before we get underway, and as you look at the agenda for how this presentation is laid out, there were approximately 4,500 students who participated in our state testing program. And 2022 as a school year, a little bit unique in that it's marking the first year of what I'm going to call tenuously typical school conditions. We did provide a presentation on the 2021 state assessment results, as you recall, but that was the year when districts across the state of Connecticut were in varying forms of hybrid and or remote and or in-person school. The testing was very different. So we did have a state assessment that year. It did not count towards the federal school accountability guidelines. And the presentation, the data results that have come from that, as we talked about during that presentation, are something that the state is kind of excluding from a typical trend set for data. So when I give this report this evening, what you'll see is we'll use the previous 4-year averages for pre-pandemic performance to really kind of benchmark and provide us context with how we're doing. All right. We'll go through the assessment achievement results, the growth results, and we'll provide you those traditional performance analysis by our demographic reference group, as well as our student groups. We'll do a short piece on the science and open up to your questions. But before we get into it, just by way of public service announcement, these are templates of what the student individual score reports look like. These score reports have been mailed home in the last several weeks, so parents should see them. They contain a number of different pieces of information, the first of which is the scale score and the performance level. As you see on the slide, the state has defined performance into 4 broad categories. The state also provides, for any student that's in grades 4 through 8 and participated previously, they'll provide their previous year's score and level with the current score so that parents can have some sense of student growth and performance year over year. They get into claim scores, which is kind of like subtests. So students, if I'm talking about literacy, I can understand the specific reading performance, writing performance, speaking and listening. And they also provide numerical measures of quantile and lexile, which are intended as numeracy and literacy type levels. So that's really just to provide some context for our parents at home as to what that looks like. Now, zooming way out to the macro level, we'll go through the district achievement results. And when the state released results at the beginning of the fall here, they said statewide, we recognize that in 2022, we anticipate and we see, and West Hartford certainly does as well, a lag in performance as compared to the previous 4-year average of pre-pandemic results. That said, there are some things for us to celebrate, and there are a number of things for us to look at that are very optimistic. The trend at the state level is a dip of between 6 to 8 points in ELA and mathematics and 4 points in science. And we will be looking at that. We'll look at our individual results as well as I'm going to define for you what I'm calling a recovery rate, which is the percentage of performance of this current year in comparison to the 4-year average. So as you see on the slide in literacy, and you can see the trend overall, you see that West Hartford is certainly not a stranger to this dip in performance based on the pandemic. We had 67.3% of students achieving goal or advanced, which is at or above grade level for literacy, 58.2% in mathematics, and those represent roughly 95% of our previous 4-year average in both categories. So we're pleased with that recovery rate that is greater than our DIRG and our state, which we will look at in a later slide. And you can see that our difference from our 4-year average is certainly less than the statewide trend in literacy and significantly less in mathematics. So overall, given the pandemic, we'd qualify it as a relatively strong year. Student growth results are measured on something that's called the average percentage of a target achieved. Each individual student has their own growth target based on where they perform. Students that are at the lowest level have an aggressive target to try to make a year and a half's worth of growth. Students that are at goal have a target in order to maintain or exceed goal. And even students who are above goal still have a growth target. The state sets those based on where the students fall, whether it be the high end or the low end of each of those 4 performance categories. And then what they do is they measure the amount of growth and they normalize it on a scale from 0 to 110%. If you hit your target exactly, the state wanted you to make 50 points of scale score growth and you made all 50, then your percentage of target achieved is 100%. If you exceeded your growth target, then you would get somewhere, you'd get that extra credit. You get somewhere between 100 and 110%. But if you only made 25 points of growth and they wanted 50, obviously you only made 50% of your target. What you can see is that we did essentially have or tied our strongest percentage for growth target overall. In English language arts, if you average up the previous 4 years, we had been averaging about 63.4 for our APTA. We had 66.1, and in math, if you average it over the 4 years, it was roughly 67, and we were at roughly 68. To be able to interpret this, first and foremost, the goal targets that the state set are tremendously rigorous. They set goal targets not based on the average of what everybody made. They set it on the 60th percentile. So it's not surprising when you look at the growth values across the state. Most districts are somewhere in the 60s. If you're above that 60, you're doing, kind of better than average. But what it all means is that the state of Connecticut is, overall, we don't have the ability to kind of match this for West Hartford, but they predict that grade 4 and 5 students are somewhere between 2 to 3 months behind the expected performance had there not been a pandemic, and students in the middle grades are somewhere between 5 to 7 months behind. And that's the lingering impact of COVID. But these higher than typical growth rates are a sign of accelerated learning and something that we take as a positive sign post-pandemic. Looking at how do West Hartford scores correspond to scores across the state and certainly our DIRG. And as you know, while the state discourages DIRG comparisons, we have never shied from that. We recognize that the demographic reference group is an important thing when individuals consider moving into West Hartford, and so we want to be able to provide that comparison to the Glastonburys, the Simsburys, the Avons, the Farmingtons, which we know are competitive districts in terms of our real estate market. So what you'll see here, the open-ended circles are the literacy results and the closed are the math. Green represents DIRG B. Blue represents West Hartford, and red represents the state. We continue to perform comparably with our DIRG. We're very pleased with that. And we notice that there is a trend that we follow, that the DIRG follows, that the state follows, that obviously in 21-22 there is a fall off from the previous 4-year average. However, we're pleased to report that our fall off is significantly less than the DIRGs and the states. The state average to be down about 6 points in both literacy and math, with a recovery rate of somewhere between 87 to 89%. The DIRG was down 5.1, 5.2 points, only had a 93% recovery rate. And on the previous slide, you saw that we were only down 2 or 3 points between literacy and math, with an overall 95% recovery rate. So overall, the bottom line is we've narrowed our gap from the DIRG to the least amount that it's been. Typically, we have about a 5-point gap in ELA. We're only at 4 points this year. Typically, we have about an 8.5-point gap from our DIRG in math. We're only at a 6-point gap this year. When you benchmark that across the state, that puts West Hartford, continues to put West Hartford in the top third of performance of all districts. That said, we have work to do. And like all districts across the state, we've identified a high needs group using criteria, the following 3 criteria. And this is a state-defined category. If you're in the high needs group, that means that you're receiving services for English language proficiency or an English language learner. You may be a special education student with an individualized education plan, or you're socioeconomically disadvantaged as evidenced by participation in the free and reduced lunch. And what the state had found years ago, after kind of tracking and looking at achievement gaps, where typically were measured based on race and ethnicity, what they found was it really wasn't race and ethnicity that was the real factor. Race ethnicity was really a confounding factor. It was participation in a high needs group that really demonstrated the achievement gaps. And that was something that I spoke to in the report. We are aware that we have and continue to have a persistent roughly 30-point gap between the high needs student group and the all students group for comparison. Our literacy rates, if I'm reading this slide correctly, for this year for our high needs group were 37.5. Our math was at 29.1. The size of the gap is consistent, but what is true is that relatively speaking, there is some narrowing of the gap between the high needs and the all students for West Hartford for this year. Comparing that to the state level, if that comparison is important, we recognize we have significant work. High needs group for the state was in literacy was only at 28 points, 28% of students at goal, and math was just under 20% at 19.5. So our group is doing slightly better, but it's nothing we rest our laurels on. Certainly, these are the students that we need the most work with. Now, that being said, we further recognize that there is no singular one-year sort of a piece. If we disaggregate the results of the high needs population, and I gave an example of this in the report, if I take a specific cohort, say of English language learners, and look at them over a 4-year period, it's very interesting. Then you're able to see the growth, because that language proficiency is not going to happen overnight in a single year to the point where the student's going to automatically be able to be successful at grade level with their peers. Likewise with students with an IEP. So a cohort analysis of those, as was in the written report, kind of tells a favorable story and reflects the impact of our specialized programming. Finally, just because we've always given it and we feel responsible to pay close attention, is our performance disaggregated by race ethnicity. Here we look at 4 groups. We look at students of color, where we've banded for numbers, Black, Hispanic students of 2 or more races. We look at our Asian students, our white students, and then we look at the all students group for kind of baseline comparison. And we do see, as similarly before, we do see a persistent gap. It is roughly 20 points between, say, our students of color and the all students group. And that's fairly significant. number, obviously, and drives a lot of our work within our curriculum and within our classroom environment. We did see, interestingly, the largest largest dip for a singular group in math, specifically for Asian students. You can kind of see that on the slide. It's the one that seems to differ in pattern more than usual. And I know I responded to a question where we dug into that a little bit, and I think what highlights that more than anything is the trend, which had been that of incremental growth year after year, and then the pandemic impact. The larger issue is how we address that 20-point gap. Positive news is that gap is the smallest that it's ever been. We did see incremental growth for our students of color group in comparison to the all students group. Typically, we see had been seeing somewhere between a 21 to 23 point gap in ELA and a 22 to 25 point gap in math, and that shrunk down to 20 points. So some good overall gains relative, but certainly we recognize these are the areas where we need to continue to work. Just a final note on this slide before I go on to the science results. If you control for participation in high needs, which is to say if I separate out students of color who are in the high needs group from those who are not, students of color who are not in the high needs group, there's no gap from the all students. In fact, they outperform the all students group by anywhere between 5 and 8 points. And so it kind of just speaks to the fact that the state, while they still provide this data, really ask schools to look at and strongly focus on the longitudinal programmatic impact of your English language proficiency and your special education programs. Last slide. Quick glance at our science results. Technically it's the third year of the administration of a test, discounting the 21 test results. So the first test was there given in 2018-19 of the new science assessment and the new science standards. And so we have, by comparison, we have 1 year of post-pandemic performance to compare. And notably, we have a gap of about 4 points when you average it across, which is on par with the state average. It is obviously a slightly larger gap at the high school level. Overall, we're at a 65.6% at goal when you average across the 3 grade levels, down from an overall of 70.1 back in 2019. And it is also true that we do see similar gaps for our high needs group in the science assessment, and certainly when we break out our performance by race, looking at students of color. Asian students had no gap this year in the science assessment. And this was not in the report, but was interesting. I decided, let me look at science male versus female. Females outperform our males by about 5 points. So that's a quick overview and summary of the report writ large, but I'd love to open it up to my 2 colleagues here at the table to be able, and myself to you, to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. Questions, comments, teammates? Claire, yes.
Yeah, so I'm curious, the 1.5 expected growth of your lowest performing students, does that include the ELL students?
It does. So if you're scoring at, say a level 1 or a level 2 below standard below grade level standards, approaching grade level standards, there is somewhere in that 1.5 years growth, which is translated into a skill score. That applies equally to our English language learners, to our students with disabilities. So it's an extremely aggressive growth target that the state of Connecticut has set. Extremely challenging to achieve writ large on the district with their neediest learners, but it speaks to sort of, I think, the philosophy and the goal, which really dates back to the No Child Left Behind, that at the end of the day, it's not okay to simply say, well, I understand that student is not proficient in the English language. I understand why they're not meeting grade level standards. I mean, we all understand that, but we're not allowed to let that go, and we hold ourselves to the expectation that we can make those gains over time, if not in a singular year. But the singular year expectation is quite honestly quite an aggressive challenge.
Right. Well, and with a 1.5 years growth over the pandemic period, putting computer technology, kids with special needs, kids with learning disabilities, kids that can't read well, kids that need conversational English in order to learn English, to try to get a 1.5 years growth in a half and half remote year is pretty tough. And as a classroom teacher too, when you see the makeup of your classroom and you know that your lowest kids are supposed to make a 1.5 years growth, it's daunting. But I understand there's no way to catch up if you only make a year's growth and a year's growth and you're behind, you stay behind. But it's tough.
I did want to, it makes me just want to go back to that example and highlight the example that's in the written report regarding the English language learners. And I looked over a 4-year period, not because I wanted the 4-year period, because of the gap in testing kind of forced me in that direction. But if I recall it correctly, and I apologize if I misspeak, but I think it was for those students that were kind of at the intermediate level approaching a proficiency, about 3/4 of them 4 years later were making goal or above goal on state standards, and I believe it was for those that were at that had achieved by second grade a basic proficiency level, and a slightly stronger proficiency level in their English 4 years later. I believe it was toward 90% of them were achieving in 5th grade. So again, that's that exactly as you're saying. It's the measure of time in the district, time in the program that equates to success for our students that have, understandably, different needs that will manifest, perhaps in a lower achievement on a given year.
Other questions or comments? Ari.
I just had a general question, and I don't know if this was answered last year, and maybe I didn't pay attention. Do you have any thoughts or rationale behind the difference between kind of the discrepancy between our language scores and our math scores?
I do, and I'll let anyone else chime in as well. I think a portion of it has to do with the way the curriculum itself lays out. Math is a very sequential curriculum, so when you develop a gap in an early grade, that gap can accumulate over time and can cascade on you, whereas it's a much more cyclical within English language arts, and you look at the layout of the standards, you're consistently revisiting the similar standards. You're just going to say a deeper level, and I think that's one piece of it. I think there can be other pieces that relate to that in terms of sometimes it's the developmental readiness and the collection of the gap, perhaps at an early age that then impacts it. We see a very similar thing, and I'd have a different answer when we give the SAT presentation. So I don't want to confound it, but at that level, there's a rigor question with the numbers that they've used to benchmark what they will call the standard, the grade level standard, or for an English language arts course at grade 11 and a math score at grade 11, which has to do with some university scoring. So I don't want to say it's the same thing in mathematics at the elementary and middle school levels, but it is a trend that we've seen historically, and it's a trend that's replicated in the state that is in some way, shape, or form baked into the test itself. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
I might just add that in speaking about our English language learners, it sometimes is a falsehood that in math they should be necessarily better off. We haven't necessarily seen that play out in the sense that they still have to read, and sometimes it's more technical reading what they're doing on the math assessment than the ELA. Not to downplay the difficulty of the ELA at all, just that it's another barrier that I have to overcome, which, as Paul pointed out, they do. It just might take a little bit longer.
Ethan, I believe I saw your hand.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. One is you mentioned that you've set goals for each student. How did we do in fiscal year 22 versus 22? Yeah, 21 to 22 versus the what you had targeted, and how does that targeting compare to next year or this current year? Then I have some other questions after that.
Compared to current year?
Well, you got the results of 67% and 58%. Were we above or below where we had targeted at a macro basis?
So we're above. Make sure I answer your question, Ethan. If I want to, I like your question. How, our growth numbers themselves are higher than they have ever been in literacy, and it's essentially a three-way tie for math between.
Which graph are you looking at?
I'm looking at this one here on 2000, and I'll give you a page reference.
Oh, the second one? Okay, got it.
Yeah. So the dark blue column on the far right represents our growth, our average percentage of growth target achieved, or essentially our growth measure for 22. And then going backward in time, all of the previous years. So ELA kind of stands out as the strongest example of we had, very good growth, slightly above the pre-pandemic level in 18-19, which I believe was also some of our highest year for achievement in literacy, if I recall correctly. I'd have to go back a slide to check that. We've enjoyed stronger growth in math, despite the fact that we go back and look at, as the question was just raised, our achievement level for math has always lagged slightly from our achievement level in literacy, but we've enjoyed stronger growth in math, as you can see here, over that same 5-year period, due in large part once we named math as that significant area of focus, and we started to invest some additional resources, and we kind of changed up a lot of our instructional strategies relative to math. We had seen that, and we had seen that year over year climb within mathematics. So it is.
But isn't that partly we also set because on the graph one, I guess I'll refer to it, the first graph. The results are lower than the prior 4 comparable years.
Exactly. So our achievement is lower, but the individual growth. And the one thing that I'll apologize may be confusing. So we're not reflecting the 2021 achievement results here, but whatever you scored in 2021, wherever you landed as an individual, the state assigned you a growth target based on that performance. Oh. And so.
So it's the state assigning it, or
the state assigns it. It's a common,
Oh, for the overall group.
Yeah, if you and I are in different towns and we both score a 2,300 on the math test, then we would expect you to make this many points, and we'd expect you to be at 2,375 next year or something like that.
So
just made those up.
Using the current graph that you got up there, what is the target set for this upcoming year?
So interestingly, the target is always set, and this is the beautiful part, the target is always set at 100%. They want 100, and I want...
No, what do you...
What is a realistic target?
Oh, okay. I assume we had a realistic target. Okay. I got it.
We... 100. That's the trouble. Now, on achievement, the way that the state has done achievement, and you'll get to see this at a later board report, we'll go over something called the performance and profile report for the district. And they will translate all of the assessment data, which talks about the percentage of kids who are at goal, and they'll translate it into an index. And the index will be between 0 to 100, but 75 is the target. And that would take some explanation and probably some quick brushing off of notes for me to better explain it, but it takes into account the fact that they recognize that some students won't automatically be at goal in a given year based on the need to have a progression toward goal.
Awesome. So I'm assuming the 67, 58% are hitting, I think it was 3 and 4, levels 3 and 4.
Correct, that's what that's saying. 58% of students
Right.
achieved a level 3 or 4.
Okay.
And then their complement did not.
So maybe next time, I'd be interested to see who was in, how much were in 1, 2, and 3, and the breakout of all 4 groups.
Break them out by each individual.
Yeah,
We
I
could
think
certainly
that'd
do that. I'd be
Okay,
happy
thanks.
to.
And my last question, because I think, just so I don't overdo it. Obviously, there was a gap caused, or not obviously, but there was a gap caused, I assume, by COVID in the last year. What is the plan, the objective for all groups, and also for particularly the colored group, just because the numbers are so, dropped so much, to get back to
100%. That is the question I think my colleagues have been greatly anticipating, because that's the part they want to talk to you about, and I'll jump in on at the end. I'll let them have some airtime.
Okay.
Great question. So what are we doing? And I looked at data from 18-19 again, pre-pandemic, just to see where we were in
18-19?
18-19 school year,
Oh,
to look
okay,
at
okay.
intervention.
I thought
Sorry,
you meant the year
2018 to
18-19.
2019. I just thought that was a great comparison. Look back, pre-pandemic, where were we? And in mathematics, at the elementary level, we had a tutor force in place, funded through a variety of sources, some towns, some grant funding, federal and state grant funding. And we have increased the number of tutors now to 10. So in the past year with the ESSER funding increases. And so we went from having 13 to 14 tutors a year now to 25. So we have a very strong math intervention force in place right now. We do regular training with them. We have very strong intervention programs, so consistency and equity across schools. So we're really pleased with I think that's really leading to this math growth that we're seeing. We have basically doubled the number of children in elementary school from roughly 400 to 824 this year in that time period. So with those tutors in place, we're able to support many more children and support them at both that tier level 2 and level 1 level. So students who are not achieving at goal, it's been excellent. In literacy, we've had a very strong literacy force in place with our reading specialists, reading intervention teachers, but we also were able to increase up to 27 tutors as well in literacy from a previous number of roughly 12 to 13. Some people work part-time, so I was trying to go to FTE. So we've, again, doubled our tutor force, workforce, and they are predominantly certified teachers in literacy, all certified, I think all but 2 in mathematics. So they are a strong workforce for us. And in literacy, we've gone from about 600 to about 735 students receiving intervention. So we've been able to significantly double in mathematics and provide much more intensive support in literacy with the support of those ESSER funds over the past several years.
So I was just going to share the complement at the secondary level. I think one of our big pushes was the math coaches that we've been able to hire, especially at the middle school level. I think they've been a huge help in terms of pushing into classrooms and doing a lot of tier 1 instruction with teachers side by side. Sometimes they do co-teaching, sometimes they do model teaching, and sometimes they're working one-on-one in a classroom with a small group of students while the teacher's working with other students. In addition to that, this year, they're also looking at our pull-out programs, so our tutoring programs, and trying to specialize more and tailor more of those sessions to students with similar needs. So I have a need to brush up on some of my numeracy skills. I'm going to see if I can group those students together versus algebraic reasoning might be a different group of students. So really looking at trying to specialize those programs more within the tutoring. And we have both math teaching assistants and math tutors at the middle school level who work under that math coach and under the department supervisors.
And I'm going to add one piece, and apologize, I know this is going to be a long answer overall, but this is very important. the board had supported the addition of math coaches, and I want to draw the distinction between a math coach that primarily works with teachers on their pedagogy and their planning and the co-teaching, as Michelle said, and the math interventionists that Carrie's talking about that they're typically direct support to service students that are showing signals of being in need of intervention. At the schools, our model with the math coaches has evolved over time since we started with them, and we increased the number of coaches with ESSER funding, as you heard. But the impact of those coaches has been significant. And typically, I don't single out schools here at this board table. That information is freely available on the public website for anyone who wants to look it up. But at the schools where we embed the coaches, whether that be based on two factors, based on need for support and a culture that's ready to kind of adopt and accept that change and have a different person in the room, which is a whole piece. We have 4 schools where we've say at the elementary level where we've done that out of the 11, because we don't have 100 coaches. They've all achieved over 100% recovery rate. So they're all above what their previous 4-year averages are, and they've all either made the highest in an echo of a pandemic. They've either made the highest achievement rate in mathematics, or tied for this, or not tied, or achieved the second highest for the previous 4-year average. So that's the impact. At the middle school, where those coaches are newer, it's a similar story, but they're breaking in more or less by team in terms of, hey, I've got these 3 different teams, but which team am I working the closest with, just because they're ready for it and they're accepting of it, and we've only had the year and a half really under challenging conditions with COVID. And we see some of those same results in terms of that grade level performance. So it might be the 6th grade school, the 6th grade team over at this school, and the 7th grade team over at this other school. So we're very, very excited. In fact, we then, seeing the success of that model, pretty much really started to manifest not only this year but a little bit last year. We are working with our reading team to say, hey, instead of just being the reading specialist and being the superstar for the direct intervention, we need you to be able to spread some of those skills to the teachers in terms of how you can push in with them and support their planning, which also speaks to the increase in the tutors, so that we're not losing sight of how do we provide those direct services to kids, but how can we take this level of expertise and have this impact for all students, which we're seeing play out in math. So that I'm so thankful for the question, because we wanted to really highlight that's been an effort that's been truly impactful.
That's a concern. Just one more since I was just curious on the science graph. It showed an improvement from 11th grade to 8th grade from, well, sort of 5th grade. Is that just unique to the science, or is that would I see that if you had a similar graph for math and reading? Does it get improved relative to standards as they get older, or is it? And
are you meaning say the cohort? And I have to do some quick math in my head here. If I took the test in 18-19 as an 8th grader, so if I'm in the blue chart, am I in the orange chart?
Well, each one of those years, it's an improvement. The 11th grade is higher than the 8th grade, and slightly higher than the 8th grade.
I see what you're saying.
So my question is, do we have some kids who just are able to achieve better scores as they get older?
I think,
which would be a good sign for everybody.
Absolutely. I think, as Carrie's whispering in my ear, she's 100% right. The science curriculum in the 5th grade, it's not an everyday experience. It's every couple of days, 2-3 times a week.
Units.
Chunks.
In the middle of an elementary lab, you're going to be in it for a week, and then you might take a break, do some writing with it. So it's more embedded and integrated with our writing and mathematics.
So we wouldn't see it necessarily in literature.
But I think that explains why in the middle school now you're in a structured every day. I have 40 minutes of science instruction by a science certified teacher, and then likewise at the high school I'm building off of that, and I have the benefit of really by the time I'm a junior, I have the benefit of 6 years at that point of dedicated science instruction every single day with the addition of labs. So I've got additional time on task. I actually attend the equivalent of 7 class periods per week. So there's an increase of time on task with science at the high school setting, which I think can help to explain some of that increase that I see that you're talking about.
All right, thanks. Thank you, and thanks for the graphs.
Claire?
So I did want to add the fifth grade test includes content from second, third, fourth grade. So the fifth graders are being tested on science that they had 3 years ago. So it combines it all. So it's a tough test at fifth grade. The approach you're using with the coaches, that is really tier 1, correct? Could you just, to help people who aren't as familiar with the tiers, just do a quick explanation of the tiered approach? Because tier 1 is a great way right now to target this impact that we have.
I just met with one of our math coaches earlier today to on our biweekly meeting to check in how things were going, and as follow-up to some of our work with tutors last week. And that coach works in collaboration with classroom teachers on in PLCs, professional learning communities, on grade level teams at the elementary level. So meets with them regularly, supports their planning. If they're working on an assessment, they'll bring that assessment back together and talk about how students are doing. Is there a need for additional interventions or supports, which would be tier 2 or 3? And typically tier 2 would be students who might require some additional supplemental support beyond the classroom. So they might be close to grade level, might need some reinforcement of a skill, knowledge or skill in mathematics, might be working on their math fluency, a certain concept. We have a great new assessment that we've put in place called iReady, which we're using at the middle school, which helps us understand what those needs are along with classroom work. So the coach is working primarily with those teachers in teams or individually to really help them plan and really diagnose and support student needs. Might also model lessons in the classroom, math routines. We have many, in some schools, some newer teachers or people filling in on an interim basis, so they might spend a little bit more one-to-one time with some of those staff. Tier 3 are really students who've been in intervention for a bit of time, who are not responding to the intervention, who are not showing the kind of growth we'd want to see given that targeted support. And so they might receive a smaller group lesson. They might have a few more days per week, might work with 2 different interventionists depending on the needs. So there's really a process of level of support that starts with that classroom teacher support, Claire. I think that's a really important point. It's the primary place to support children is high quality instruction in the core classroom.
And this whole approach, the tiered approach, is to document and give what a child might need before you jump to special education diagnosis. So by documenting your tier 2, showing what you've done, proving there's not the growth that you would like to see, then the tier 3, and then, because it used to be, if you're not doing well, maybe you have a special education need, and now we document and cover all our bases before we go to that.
We have to make sure that there's high quality instruction happening at tier 1 before we would even consider, and a student's in attendance at school, and maybe there are other needs a student has that we need to take care of. It's not an instructional gap, right? It's a potential opportunity gap for learning for a student. So we want to make sure that tier 1 is solid and teachers have what they need. Principals and our curriculum specialists at the elementary level are integral to the math work. We have a reading specialist in place at each building to provide that teacher leadership support to teams and teachers, as well as a couple central office roles who really kind of oversee, make sure we have the curriculum materials and high quality resources that people need and training people need to be able to support.
Gayle.
Yes.
I had a question about the high needs versus the minority students. And I believe what you said is that if we controlled for the high need students, then the minority students are essentially in the same category as the rest of the students. Meaning, what I understood, and maybe I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly, is that the major issue is really the high needs students that have that larger gap, and not really minority students.
That is 100% accurate. And I'm using the all students group, so I'm using essentially the district average as the benchmark for comparison. So if you disaggregate, and I used students of color because that's where our big gap is. If I disaggregate, okay, who are those students of color that are either English language learners, and that's the significant part of the students of color group, are a lot of our Hispanic students, and a lot of them are English language learners, students with disabilities or socioeconomically disadvantaged, versus those students of color that check none of those boxes. Then the students of color not in the high needs group outperform the all students group, or essentially above the district average, by somewhere between 5 and 8 points on literacy and math. And there's explanation for it when you think about English language learner. However, the pressing problem for us is overrepresentation of students of color within students with disabilities, which goes back to the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, making sure we've got good interventions, because we need to be making certain that we're not overrepresenting any student group within special education if we can meet their needs in regular education with more thoughtful intervention.
So I guess, for me it was when I first read the report, it seemed to me that we had a huge gap, really, of students, minority students, as opposed to, white students or other students. And essentially, though, what you're saying, I believe, is that it's really more of an issue of the high needs students, and there's more students, minority students in that group, but the real issue that we need to be addressing is high needs, and if we could address that, then we would maybe bring that gap, close it up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the driver, and I think it's, there's nothing to say that a person's race or is going to in any way, shape, or form prohibit them from achieving at the same level. The prohibiting factors have been identified as a person's level of language proficiency, a person's, if they have any significant academic needs that require specialized programming, or, in the case of socioeconomically disadvantaged, it's not the case of money. It's the case of what are the conditions under which do I have that opportunity when I'm home for that quiet study and things of this nature. If I'm more worried about being able to have food, then school is not a big issue. If it's like that hierarchy of need, I need to worry about those things first. So as we look at those issues, those are the predominant drivers of the achievement gap. And again, though, that said, an internal piece for us is to make sure that we're finding that we at times will identify more students of color into students with disabilities than we would expect. So that's a part of it that we continue to work on, and I think makes up a lot of the work that we try to effect with changing that mindset, so we can control any biases of our own, look at systemic issues that we might have, and make certain that students see themselves as being able to be successful, so that they're able to take advantage of all the great opportunities that we have.
I had one other question. So do you think that these trends that we're seeing in these graphs, obviously COVID is playing a big part in that. Do you see any other factor that might be affecting this?
I think, I don't know that it's a singular factor that affects it in a year. I think it's looking at static one-year data, which is why I was very pleased to provide the anecdote about here's a more longitudinal look at a cohort of English language learners, and that's something I can do more with in our reports. Historically, when I've given these reports before the pandemic, we would look at a factor of where we saw gaps, number of years that students were in the district. And so we disaggregate some of the gaps that we saw by, all right, well, I see it's with this group of students or that group of students, but let me look to see if does that gap persist if I control for how long we have to be able to influence students. And as you would expect, the longer the students were in the district, the higher those performance levels went. So it's exactly what you're saying. Like it's not about the what's my race, what's my ethnicity. It's about all these other factors that have the impact. And what's the best way for us to be able to demonstrate that? What's the best way to make sure that we're paying that attention to that for you on your behalf, bringing that to light so that when we're making recommendations about programs or things like that that we think can impact it, that you have that full picture and can make those decisions.
Other questions? Yes, Jason.
Awesome, thank you. I think there's also, the data also tells me too what an incredible job our teachers have done, given also they've had a pandemic year or two, and still have been able to serve their students in this way. And I think having the tutors and the embedded folks is important to helping them achieve those results. And so I think just a testament to care for the teaching staff, the faculty of the district is remarkable. And so I also wanted to thank you, Paul, for responding to my question about the data. As you said, a single year's figure is difficult to interpret, and especially under these conditions. But I'm sorry I didn't ask this earlier, but I'm wondering if you continue to see an echo or a shadow of remote learners over time. And I remember having conversations before about that, but we don't have that state assessment piece to kind of think about during the pandemic years. So, and now obviously many of those students are in lots of different contexts and have had lots of other interventions and classroom experiences. So it's hard to say if they've maybe been a remote learner in the past, but now looking at where we are, do you see evidence of that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. First, let me go back to the thank you for the teachers, because I was going to close with that remark, and I should have led with it. I did want to acknowledge all the teachers in the district. It's been a dramatically difficult couple of years, and there are so many good news stories in this report in terms of we're not out of the woods by any means or any stretch. We're not complacent with where we are, but our comparables, we're making great recovery. We're making great acceleration in our learning, and it's testament to the hard work that's done by hundreds of teachers every single day. So thank you for saying that. You're absolutely right that similar to what we talked about within our high needs group, we've got conditions that have created a more challenging situation for parents in terms of that choice for remote learning. And I say that in recognition of need and in no way, shape, or form, with any air of, this is a right decision, a wrong decision, or anything like that. We know that writ large overall and across the state, that was the big story last year when the state rolled out its results and we rolled out our results. We had separate recording categories for students that were in a remote setting and students that were in an in-person setting, because there was a demonstrated academic impact, and that impact will carry forward. I know Carrie's pointing at some things that she's seen in the data within grade 2. It's something that we pay attention to in terms of when we're working with kids. And, it's one of the other things. It goes back to Ethan's question, kind of what are we doing about it? I was pleased that the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents recognized West Hartford for one of our summer programs, our middle school program, that again was designed and defined initially to re-engage those learners with a specific focus and emphasis on folks that had been in the remote setting. And that got highlighted as an innovative practice that was showcased in a publication that was sent out to the whole state, kind of as a, best practice idea within education. So we had a lot of other things that we've done in support of that group, and we continue to pay close attention. And certainly that's the part. You go back to what the state said about writ large, grades 4 and 5 are still a couple of months behind, grades 6 through 8 are 5 to 7 months behind. A lot of that has to do with that interruption of schooling, those that were in a remote setting, being able to get everybody back collectively onto one page. So we will still see some echo of this, I would say, at least for 3 more years, if not slightly longer. Hopefully, though, much less pronounced by that point.
Other Ari.
I actually, as you were speaking, I also really wanted to recognize all of you and the district as a whole, because I also think there were many districts that remained in remote status for a very long time, and our ability to kind of get very quickly into a hybrid model and then to get kids back into school, I really think that speaks to, while we did have some learning loss, I can't even imagine what our learning loss would have looked like if we didn't kind of take that initiative to get kids back in school. So I just want to recognize you for that as well.
Ditto. Yes. Yes.
So one of the things I think we lose track of the amount of anxiety and testing that comes with testing. And kids dealing with social emotional stresses. And so even though last year was a more normal year, we were still masked most of the year. There were still kids that were still remote. The year before, it was, a very mixed up year. So even our kids who tested in the spring were not in the place that they normally are, socially, emotionally, and academically and all that. And then to be given a computer-based test is tough. And then quickly, you had mentioned before on a report, we're compared to a DERG, but with 17% of our students identified as special ed with over 70 languages and the amount of free and reduced lunch, those numbers far exceed those numbers in our comparative DERG. And so the growth that we've seen and the being above the state and being compared to that DERG, these numbers are very different. So we are a very different city than who we're being compared to.
100%. Thank you, Claire. 100%. We're a unicorn as a district. We look nothing like our DERG in general. In terms of those metrics, and the one that some years we've put in that scatter plot of the percentage of free and reduced lunch, and I was playing with that this year if I'd put that in to really showcase and highlight how different we are. I chose not to at the end because I said for this year I don't want it to sound like we're trying to explain away any of the dip. I think the dip is what it is. I think we understand it, but you're absolutely right. And what is great about it, that was a hard. Chip Ward is to be credited with coming up with that, and he had to really research census data and all this other stuff to be able to get that information. I can recreate that with a lot less effort, not with not with little effort, but with a lot less effort probably than he did, based on the data that's now available on EdSite. So I'd be happy to kind of look at that and be able to benchmark us so we can get an up-to-date look at how do we look comparative when you plot percentage of free and reduced lunch against achievement data, and it gets back to what you were saying, Gayle, about that high needs group. But it really reflects how we don't look anything like the districts in our DIRG. But again, we don't shy from that comparison. It's, at the end of the day, it's a realistic comparison that individuals are making when they're deciding where to live. So we're happy to hold ourselves up against that standard.
Other questions or comments?
Just to follow up, so if you're going to say we're outside the DIRG, I can't even pronounce it, DRG, that's why I think it'd be really useful to say, here's our target of where we want to be relative to this. So, it, because how do you achieve, or, I mean, what, gets measured, usually the commonest gets done. So that would be helpful in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, and in that regard, yeah, our target would be to be overlapping or above those green lines of the DIRG 100%.
Okay, so we're still aiming for the DIRG.
If we set that as, that's really who we're benchmarking ourselves against, then we'd want to close that gap entirely.
Because to me, it's useful to have a target.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? I thought you were raising, oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Very, very appreciate the information here. Do want to say, as I have shared before, I really also appreciate every year you highlighting and addressing the achievement gap and what contributes to that. And I think that's important, repetition to highlight the salient points of that, in that it's not identified by racial categories, but more so high needs group. And that's important because we know that previous generations used to totally align it with racial disparities, racial indicators, and we know that's not so. And so recognizing that it's high needs group that really influences the achievement gap really acknowledges that many people are vulnerable to falling into that category, and certainly the pandemic has exponentially increased that vulnerability. So thank you for being honest and keeping it real and where we are, where we need to go. And I also think too, and Ethan, to your point in terms of wanting to see where our benchmark is and where we're trying to go, in comparison to our demographic reference group, that also means that we have to continue to acknowledge the achievement gap and what contributes to that if we're going to compare ourselves to the other demographic reference group. And that's why I like when reference is made to opportunity gaps, because when you look at opportunity gaps, well, why are those gaps there? And when we truly address those, that really allows for a more holistic conversation that addresses many challenges, systemic and beyond. So thank you for your candor, thank you for your commitment, and we'll see you again. Thank you. And with that, we will continue with the agenda. Now we will go back to section 4 of unfinished business. And with unfinished business, as we invite to the table Jessica Ritter, I can't see with the words. Ann coming? Yes, Ann McKernan, thank you so much. All right, there she is. All right, as we welcome them to the table, in response to a motion by Dr. Lorna Thomas-Farquharson, Dr. Gayle Harris, and Dr. Jason Chang to accept revised policy 8355. And with that, this is our first reading, and it is in response to a recommendation that the Board of Education accept as a first reading revised policy 8355, which was reviewed by the Board Policy Subcommittee. So we'll look to Ann and Jessica to indicate how we are here, and again, having a first reading as opposed to a second reading. So passing it to you both.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here with all of you. I'm Ann McKernan, of course, and this is Jessica Ritter, our attorney. Over the past several weeks, the Policy Committee has been considering Policy 8355. We've met several times and had much discussion and brought the policy in front of you actually at our previous meeting, where there were some more recommendations made. So we went back to work on it, and we are ready again to present to you tonight and open it up for your discussion. The main change that was recommended that we looked at was that we would refer to the number of speakers instead of the number of minutes. We thought that that might have more plain language for people who are reading the policy. Anything you would add to that?
With respect to this policy, this was also done in collaboration. Oh, is this not on? Sorry about that. So red means on.
Yes.
Okay, counterintuitive.
Right.
Thank you, yes. This was also done in collaboration with Attorney Dodge, Corporation Counsel. And again, this was to address some of the concerns that were raised when this was originally brought to the full board.
So thank you so very much. And with that, we'll have preliminary discussion, and then let me go ahead and do the formalities of a motion and a second, and then we will engage in discussion. And so with that, we are seeking a motion that the Board of Education approve the financial report for the, not that, pardon me. Let me get back to where we are, all of the revisions and things. All right, and as I was trying to say, we are looking for a motion that the Board of Education accept as a first reading revised policy 8355, which was reviewed by the Board Policy Subcommittee. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Gayle. Discussion. And so, yes.
Yes, I just want to say, I was one of the people who brought forward some concerns around the complexity of the language last time, and when I read through this new version, I was really pleased to see how easy it was to follow and understand. So I want to thank the policy committee and Anne and Jessica and Dallas for your work on this.
Thank you.
Other discussion? Yes, Ethan.
I could be a while. I have 20 questions I had submitted. I was wondering if I could get answers to them now or later. I have copies here if you need a copy. Might be easy.
So if I may, actually, Anne, I believe you have some information that may be helpful to share with us.
Yes. And I don't know if they will answer every of your questions, so feel free to because it was.
I'm not trying to shoot the messengers. I'm
Right.
just trying to get the answers.
I understand. So in relation to your question, I had looked up quite a bit of information on area districts and looked also at our past and what had been the trend in speakers and the number of the topics, the most common topics in those years, and the number of times the meetings were delayed, the start of the meeting were delayed.
So can we back up a minute?
Sure.
When you say delayed, does that mean there was a standard, or is that just mean it? Because like today, it took approximately a half hour. There were 7 speakers. To me, is that a delay, or is that a within reason, or is that?
Right,
You know,
so the better term would be to say that I looked at meetings that started more than 30 minutes after.
So 30 minutes is a standard you were using?
Only because that's what the policy is referring to.
You mean the new policy?
Correct.
Not the old policy?
Right, the old policy.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to define. So, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I know you have specific questions, but, and I'm happy to answer them, but I did do some research
Yeah.
on this, and we looked back at our last few years, and we looked at district, area, what's going on in many, many Hartford County towns, about 25 of them we looked at. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions, but I can tell you that, for instance, we saw, a huge increase in the number of speakers. Last year, we had 154 speakers, 462 total minutes, and that would compare to a 4-year average of about 111 minutes and 37 speakers. So it was up, almost 4 times.
Right, but, and this is, so I'll try to keep it as questions, because it's not fair to have the debate with you all. I'm still trying to understand the problem that we're trying to solve. And my expectation is that if you bring on if the board adapts something controversial, which we did with the team nicknames, you would have a lot of people want to give impact, students, community, alumni. So,
I would just say, this is a policy the board is considering. I've just asked to do the research.
No, I
So,
got that. That's.
that is a choice that, is up to the board to make if they want to go ahead. I would say that doing the research, there have been many other very controversial topics. For instance, in the 17-18 school year, school start times was very a topic that a lot of people wanted to voice their concerns on, as well as the change from Columbus Day to Indigenous People Day was another topic that brought a lot of people out. So, as a staff member, I'm not pushing for this policy. The board has looked at this policy, and we are just looking up the.
Right, no, and I'm just trying to find, again, I'm not trying to shoot the
Ethan,
messenger.
if I may, no, appreciate the question, appreciate what's been shared, and if I may share and summarize what was presented to us at our policy subcommittee meeting, which addresses many of your questions. And from what I recall, your question, again, was wanting to get kind of some data on, well, what evidence is there to show in terms of public comments from our meetings and possibly comparing to other towns as well. And thank you so much for the research that you did. And in terms of just the specifics, in terms of the number of public comments that have been made for the past, I think you researched it back to 2019.
2017-18 was the first year I looked.
2017, 2018. And with that, for the 2017, 2018, what was the number of public comments that year?
There were 39 speakers that
39
year.
speakers. And then the following year, 2018, 2019?
55.
And then the following year?
19.
And then the following year?
35.
And then the following year?
Then there was a 4-year average of 37 for those 4. And then
When you
this
say
year,
speakers, you mean the entire X amount of sessions?
the number of speakers over the board, over
Correct.
all the board meetings.
Yes.
And
then
there
the
were
following-
154 last year.
Okay, so wow, that's a significant increase. So just you see incrementally over the years, the numbers have been pretty steady in the 30s, or, 40s, 50s, but then last year it was over 100. But then I also believe you did, looking at Hartford County.
Yes.
And you looked at the other Board of Educations in terms of their meetings, because you wanted to know, well, how are other Board of Education meetings were?
And one of the things we found was West Hartford seems to have among the highest amount of public speaking opportunities. And some of that is because we have 2 meetings per month and 2 speaking opportunities per meeting.
Mhm.
And there's a number of towns, a large number of towns, at least 15 of the 25 I said, it only has 1 meeting per month, for instance. So just right there, they have many, many fewer speaking opportunities because they only have 1. Then there's a combination of different kinds of regulations on speaking. For instance, some towns put a limit on 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes. Some limit, some can actually change the number of speakers at that meeting. Some people limit a speaker to 1 topic. Some limit times a person can speak at all. Some don't have 2 public speaking sessions in 1 meeting. So when we looked around, I can't say definitively we have the most, but we certainly have among the most generous opportunities. And there is no requirement to have any opportunity to speak.
No, I understand that.
So since there's no requirement to have any, and I couldn't find a district with more. I could find maybe 1 or 2 that seemed about the same, but the vast majority of districts have much less opportunity. So that was just to address the question, where do we stand in terms of other districts and the number of opportunities people have? And really by nature of 2 meetings a month and 2 opportunities at each meeting, we certainly have among the highest in Hartford County, if not the highest.
Oh. Can I ask? Okay. Was there, how much, so you gave, and I didn't get it totally, but like 150, how much of that was team nicknames and how much of that was SE?
Well, I did look at, last year, 37 of the 154 were team mascots.
Okay.
20 different speakers, 20 on SEL also had 46 speakers.
So SEL was actually higher than team nicknames?
Yes.
And they counted roughly for approximately 50% of the speakers, the 2 subjects together?
Probably.
Well, they did.
Yeah, I didn't do a
Just
percentage, but yes.
Just using your math?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I'm just saying, how many towns? Oh. There's some other questions which I don't think y'all, because one of the things I'm struggling with, and I don't know if you guys are the ones to ask for the policy committee,
Sure.
is how do I define what's on the agenda and what's not on the agenda? So like today, were there any topics in today's agenda that somebody could have spoken on? I don't think any of the speakers spoke on anything on the agenda, but. Well, yeah, okay, that's fair, on the policy.
And as we know, on the sign-up sheet, there is a column for topic, so they'll write the topic down. And if we are able to move forward with amending and updating this policy, 8355, something also we could consider is on each sign-up sheet, have the agendas items that'll be covered that particular day. So those that are signing up will be able to visibly see if what they want to comment on is on the agenda for that particular day.
Well, and just a reminder, legally, you have to post within 24 hours before regular or
Oh, no, I don't
special
have a
meetings.
problem
So
with
the
that.
public would be fairly
My
apprised as
question
to
was
what would be on
more,
the
in
agenda.
fairness, the policy was on the agenda, but there's some times where it's hard to say anything else would have been an agenda item, other than, like, most of it was just reports that we have.
But then that would be a day where, that would be a day, given the current policy, that if people wanted to come and talk about things that weren't on the agenda, and there was nobody speaking about the agenda, then they would be able to speak in the first session up until, how many speakers? 10 speakers.
And you're still
Correct.
maintaining the second public comment
Yep.
period, which has been unlimited and has not been impacted by the changes in this policy.
I understand, and I should have asked the question, I didn't. I'd be interested to see how many people speak in the first and how many, because we get very few left by the end.
Yeah, in reviewing, there were some meetings, there were no speakers at the end, and then there were some meetings that
No,
were
there's been some,
handful.
but it's been minimal.
The majority were in the beginning, but certainly people can come and stay if they have topics that are very important to them.
Okay. Those were the questions I had that pertain to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Again, Jason, Gayle, and I are aware. We appreciate so much your participation in our policy subcommittee meeting. So, other teammates, any other comments regarding what has been proposed? And just for consistency, we'll read aloud what the revised public comment policy is. It reads, "The board welcomes public comment as it represents an opportunity for members of the public to express their views to the board on matters within the board's authority. Each member of the public wishing to speak may address the board for 3 minutes at the beginning and 3 minutes at the end of each meeting, for a total of 6 minutes during the board's 2 public comment periods. Persons commenting on agenda items shall be permitted to comment first. No more than 10 persons shall be permitted to comment during the public comment period at the beginning of the meeting, provided that such limitation shall not apply to persons commenting on agenda items. A maximum of 7 persons shall be allowed to comment on each subject matter. No person shall interrupt a meeting or render the orderly conduct of such meeting unfeasible, and the chairperson may order any individual who engages in such conduct removed. While the board will not respond to comments made in public session, it will consider such comments in its policy deliberations and, where appropriate, will refer comments to school department personnel for their review as part of their administrative functions." So again, this is what we are proposing as a first reading. We've had discussion. Any other discussion regarding the first reading here?
Well, let me do the discussion. I still, because I was trying to ask questions before, I still looking for the problem. It seems to me that we've had some conversations, but generally that's why I was trying to find out how many's under 30 minutes, how many's above 30 minutes. I still think we should be looking at, if there is a problem with the extension, you do things like you did today, where you change the agenda so that those who, students can get out earlier. There's ways to look at it. We haven't talked about alternatives. And I think it's very important that the public have confidence that their voice is being heard. That's what we're here for. I think it fosters collaboration and coordination. And if you don't, then it looks like you're hiding something. And I think that's just, it's not an image. I strongly believe that everybody should have the ability to express themselves. Frankly, the emails sometimes are very hard to follow. It's more, to me, more useful to have people speaking here. So I strongly oppose it, and I wish we would look at alternatives or just truly define the problem, but it is what it is.
Thank you. Just for the record, you said you strongly oppose. We're not voting right now, but you're already acknowledging your stance. Okay, thank you. Ari, yes.
I guess I just want to kind of reiterate I know that there have been comments and public comment that feels that this policy is somehow preventing people from speaking, preventing people from their voices being heard. And I really feel that this policy really just prioritizes what topics are being discussed. It doesn't limit people from coming and speaking at a board member and having their voice heard. It's about the timing of when their voice is heard. And I do feel that it's really important for us to be able to prioritize things or subject matter that is on an agenda, especially if it's something that we may be voting on. It doesn't make much sense to have someone wait who's here to talk about something on the agenda that wants their voice heard regarding a topic that we might be voting on. And then, in a way, then their voice is not being heard at all. So, we might have had many people in the previous meetings on mascots, mask mandates, SEL, things that we were voting on in a meeting whose voice wasn't heard because the time was up or the subject matter was up. So I actually feel like changing this policy allows prioritization of the topics on the agenda, but does not silence anyone.
Thank you. And just want to reiterate that as well. With what is being proposed, emphasis is on prioritizing public comments of those that are speaking on agenda items. And with respect to that, as the policy indicates, there is no limit on how many speakers may speak on agenda items. So it says 7, but that's in regard totality and may pertain to non-agenda items. But let's say we have 10 individuals that want to speak solely on agenda items. They would have that opportunity to do so. Because again, our priority is at that time is wanting to prioritize comments from individuals who are here to speak on agenda items. For those that want to speak on non-agenda items, they have an opportunity as well, as long as we have not exceeded the 7 individuals. If we have, we also know that we have public comment at the end of the meeting as well. So there's no restriction of public comment opportunity. It's just trying to be planful and purposeful. We're making sure that we're hearing from those individuals that are speaking to matters at hand. Just want to say that because it's important for the narrative to be correct in terms of what our efforts are and what our intentions are of wanting to assure that we're able to stick to the business at hand. Deb, yes.
One question. In the last sentence of the first paragraph, the proposal is that it would say, a maximum of 7 persons shall be allowed to comment on each subject matter. Do we mean during each public comment period, beginning and end, or total for the meeting?
That is, do you have a question? Okay. That is, if we're at the beginning of the meeting, public comment, that's 7 for that beginning meeting. If we're at the end of the meeting, the clock starts again, so to speak, not the clock.
I just wonder whether we need to clarify that in the policy to say on each subject matter during each period, during each public comment period or something, just to clarify that it can be 7 in the beginning and 7 at the end.
Duly noted. Thank you. Okay. Other thoughts or comments?
I can go. Well, then my question would be, if it's important to keep things on the agenda item, and why stop at 7 if you have 10 speaking spots? So theoretically, like today, you might have had 9 people who wanted to speak on that one item that was on the agenda.
They all would have an opportunity to speak.
No, they wouldn't. There'd only be 7 on an item.
No. If they all would have an opportunity to speak. However, if there were 8 individuals that wanted to speak on non-agenda items, up to 7 would have an opportunity to speak, and those others who did not.
It says a maximum of 7 people shall be allowed to comment on each subject matter.
So let me see.
That's on the first paragraph at the bottom.
So, my apologies, I was not the author of this, but I can speak to what we discussed in the policy subcommittee, that the intent of this would be that the limitation is with the first public comment period to make sure that we can have more efficient, meetings and expedite process. And then at the end, there should be the ability to have public comment the way that you always have without these limitations. So I don't disagree that it doesn't per se read like that, but just to hopefully mitigate some of Mr. Goldman's concerns, certainly if you were to wait around the intent that I understood from the policy committee was not to limit the second public comment period.
Correct.
So I do agree that we could wordsmith that slightly.
But it does say just 7, and I realize it's for the first section,
Yes,
but it does limit it to 7 if you have.
on each subject matter.
On each
Yeah, I
subject
understand.
matter.
Yes.
But that was different than what I thought I heard Lorna say, unless I'm incorrect.
Pardon me, yes.
I'm
on
not
each-
trying to, I'm just.
No,
trying to
that's
understand.
why you're here, that's why you were, yes, no, this is good. So, yes, pardon me, so 7 per subject matter, but just did not want to mislead that if we have 5 agenda items and we have individuals that want to speak on each agenda item, and let's say 8 persons want to speak on each agenda item, they would be able to do so. So the time limit, the number of persons is not limited for those items that are on the agenda. We need to revisit, but we will look at this again.
Doesn't,
I'm trying to channel you into our meetings. It made sense as we talked in our meetings, and just want to make sure that it is accurately conveyed here, because it's important for you to understand, however you may ultimately vote on it, but understand that what we're voting on, we're seeing it
no,
accurately.
I respect it.
So, in the mass debate, we made a revision to the policy in that we allowed 7 speakers pro and 7 speakers against the change. So I would think in some situations, there were 20 or 14 speakers in one meeting, and then the other speakers went at the end. So we did double the 7 speakers in that meeting, and then we had about 5 additional, I believe, at the end of the meeting.
Right, I don't know if we did mass first, I think they may have come first, but I don't think. Names, I'm sorry. The team names. I don't think we ever said, this is the group that needs, oh, I'm sorry. I don't think we ever said, this is the first subject we're gonna cover. It was whoever was in order.
Right, but what she's
But
saying,
that's- yeah.
we kept a running
Oh, I
total
know,
of the
yeah.
subjects, yes, and we did allow for.
14 speakers
Right.
on one subject.
Yep. All right.
Want to include the voice of Gayle and Jason, who also are representing our policy subcommittee as we engage in this discussion. I don't want to monopolize the time.
I felt that this was a good compromise to try to accommodate both hearing from the public and being responsive to the public, but also being mindful of the fact that we are running a meeting here and we are trying to get through a certain agenda. We have people that come and sit here and are going to present to us, and if we have, many speakers, as we have had at some meetings, it can also be somewhat unfair to the people who are sitting here waiting to present. So I felt that this was something that could both take into account the need to hear from the public, and I am also mindful of the fact that, there are parents here that want to speak with small children. They don't want to be here at 10 o'clock at night like we are, waiting to speak, so that it would give, potentially some of these people the ability to speak at the beginning of the meeting, and then obviously have some people speak at the end of the meeting. So is it, a perfect policy? Probably not, or any policy's perfect, probably not, but I do think it tries to accommodate different things that we were trying to accommodate when we put the policy together.
Yeah, I want to thank the policy committee. It's given us the occasion to hang out quite a bit. So we've
There'll
done
be
some
more occasions.
Yes, yeah, right here. So this is a policy that, as Gayle said, does not dictate what people can say, or if they can say something to us, just when. That's the only limitation, is when. So if I could break down the language here, I think that may be helpful in our process here. So the second sentence, each member of the public wishing to speak may address the board for 3 minutes at the beginning, 3 minutes at the end, for a total of 6 minutes. Right, so we already know 6 minutes is among the most generous of any district in the area. 6 minutes is, so, and we actually hear a lot from our public, which is tremendous. Third sentence here. Persons commenting on agenda items shall be permitted to comment first. Right? If it's on the agenda, first in line, right? No more than 10 persons shall be permitted to comment during the public period at the beginning of the meeting, provided that such limitations shall not apply to persons commenting on agenda items. So unlimited public comment on agenda items. If we're voting on electrifying school buses, we can have unlimited public comment on electrifying school buses, that meeting. And then the last sentence here is a reiteration of our current policy, right? That we have this 7-person per category. So the way that each of those sentences breaks down does not in any way, shape, or form dictate if someone can speak. And it prioritizes those people who are speaking on things that we are conducting business on in this meeting, or the meeting that they're speaking on. So I realize you may have some resistance to the change, but I want to lay those claims to rest, that this is in any shape or form preventing people from commenting. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so without other further discussion, because we have additional policies to present as a first reading, we
Can I
will...
make one last comment?
Yes, you may.
So I guess what I would ask is that we be transparent. I obviously have an opinion different than most. Can we show the data or show something to have something that people can see, as opposed to, there's data out, you have, what you said, and I can, and maybe answer some of my questions, maybe not, however you want to show it, but show here's what the numbers were, as opposed to, I just think it's important to be transparent.
Yes, we shared that at the policy subcommittee meeting.
But we didn't share it to the public.
Well, it is, if I may, we are being transparent because every information that was gathered is publicly available, whether it is, you think you did your research online or by
Yes,
viewing
I handed
videos.
this out as paperwork at the policy committee meeting, and those are public meetings that people can attend. And I can share it again.
Can we share that? Can we ourselves share it?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not
No, it's
sort of
a public
privileged
meeting.
information.
Well, and this is also a public record.
Right, but it's nicely concise.
Information is available in our record. You can go through
I know, but
the board
Ann
book.
has summarized it in a nice way.
Yes, so you can absolutely share this with members of the public. There's nothing here that is not subject to disclosure.
Okay, thank you.
So just to continue, I think it's important to have people express their opinion. And just, I would say, we should be looking at other alternatives other than just, so maybe what you do is put the agenda items first and see what happens 6 months from now. If you think the amount of speakers is too many, then go back. But the reality is, there's very few people who last until the end. And I say that as somebody who will be at a 3:30 in the morning call tomorrow morning. So I just as soon get out as fast as everybody else, but I think it's important to have people express themselves, so just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Sir, Deb, yes.
I'm sorry, just to respond. I think it's important for you to know that the reason we have a policy committee is to review and make recommendations to changes to our policy. So any policy that we have is subject to review and to amendment at some point in the future. That's why the policy committee exists, and that's what we do. So if we do adopt this policy or something similar, and 6, 8 months down the line, we decide this really isn't working out for some reason, I mean, nothing is etched in stone here. That's, why you have a Board of Education, so that we can review and amend policy.
All right, well, thank you all for the robust discussion, and we will consider this our first reading. We will come together again to present this as a second reading, taking into account the suggested verbiage to add, change a little bit, but the context is still the same, and thank you so much for that. And so we now will move on to new business.
Correct. Thank you. Again, this is the larger group of policies that we are working on, and I'm just going to give you a little background to this for those who may not have heard. But back in June, I believe I have the date is June 2nd, 2020, the Board of Education during a formal meeting voted to approve all of the model policies that Shipman and Goodwin, our attorneys, draft. Then we chose to adopt all that are legally required by state or federal law or otherwise are essential to the operation of our school districts. So in a sense, Shipman and Goodwin puts together model policies because all the districts need to have these policies that are under the control of state and federal law. So Shipman and Goodwin does this for us, and at the June 2nd, 2020 board meeting, we chose to adopt that model policy book. And the reason we're here before you today is because there have been changes in state and federal law since that time, and we would like to move some policies forward. We have more than just the ones we have tonight, but there are a number of them. So our plan is to chunk them out and to present them to you. Instead of you looking at 50 policies at once, we can look at a number of policies each time. So tonight we are looking at, I believe there are 10 or 11 policies here that the policy subcommittee discussed. There were others on the list during the subcommittees. I think there was up to 13. There were 3 we chose to hold off on and talk about more. But at this point, we have these model policies to present to you. I would remind you, and Jessica probably will do a better job of this, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the discretion we have with these policies.
Sure, I'm happy to answer any questions you specifically might have about any of these policies, but all of the policies that are before you this evening, you are required by either state or federal law to have. So there is no discretion there. You are required to have written policies. We all know that if we don't have written policies in place that we are required to have, that can obviously lead to significant exposure or liability for the district, so we certainly don't want to do that. We also want to make sure that once we have these written policies, we are following them and complying with them, and that they are readily available to our staff and to our community. I'm happy to go through some of the changes that you'll see. So just to give you a little bit more of a background on our model policy subscription. So you are now model policy subscribers, which you have been for the last 2 years. As part of that subscription, we have a team of lawyers, and I mean a team, like 10 to 15 lawyers who every year are vetting all of the technical or substantive or procedural changes to state or federal law, and then every year we roll those out to our model policy subscribers. So it is part of the process that you would review them from a technical standpoint, review them from a substantive standpoint, but I will say, particularly for some of these, there's very little discretion that you as a Board of Education have. So if you said to me today, I would like to look at the Title IX protocols and procedures much differently, and I want to put my own spin on it, I would say, well, you can't. And this is what is required by both state and federal law, and this has been vetted by a team of 15 lawyers who have also gone through the experience of doing the trainings and also living the procedures and have put forward what we believe to be the best practice after having that experience with the new regulatory changes. So again, I'm happy to go through this. I understand with some of this it can be frustrating because you don't necessarily have discretion. There are some policies that will come later down the pike where you will have a little bit more discretion. But again, you let me know how best you want to go through this.
Jess,
Sure.
Thank you very much for explaining that. And for context a little bit, because we have some members who weren't with us in 2020 when we did this initially, could you explain a little bit about the Shipman service and how many districts across the state participate in that?
So in terms of a number, if I had to guess, probably close to 90 to 100
I
that
think we're about
participate.
93 or before.
Yeah,
before.
about that. I'd say about 90 to 100 that do participate. Policy is one of your statutory charges. It is one of the most important things that you do. And it is very important, like I said, that your policies comply with state and federal law, or it will obviously be potentially greater exposure or liability to a school district. Certainly, like I said, there are some things, we have a number of policies that we need to review, so there have been some significant changes from what you adopted back in 2020 to where we find ourselves in present day, and a lot of those changes really are a result of the pandemic. So some of the, even the technical changes that you'll see is a result of some of the experiences that we had with the pandemic. I would say this is probably something that you have to do on an annual basis, though I think that this is going to be far more comprehensive because all of our school districts found themselves a little bit behind the 8 ball because of COVID. So I don't anticipate this being the same daunting process in subsequent years that it is currently.
Thank you so much. If I may, before we continue with discussion, I'll just formally ask for, present the motion that is with this, in that we are, recommendation that the Board of Education accept as a first reading the following policies which were revised by the Board Policy Subcommittee. Instruction Series Policy 6212, Parent-Teacher Communication. 6291, Parent and Family Engagement Policy for Title I students. 6330, Homework. 6421, Parental Access to Instructional Materials. Student Series Policies, 5110, Confidentiality and Access to Education Records. 5130, Transportation. 5147, Students in Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. 5635, Physical Activity, Under-Directed Play, and Student Discipline. 5690, Suicide Prevention and Intervention. 5691, Title IX of the Educational Amendments of 1972, Prohibition of Sex Discrimination and Sexual Harassment Students. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Let us continue with discussion. Any other discussion regarding these policies?
Can I
Yes,
just
Ethan.
ask a question? Jessica?
Sure.
I'm making the assumption, with the exception of COVID, that there wasn't anything that really, it looked like a lot of wording changes. Is that incorrect? Or are there some where the policy changed dramatically?
So,
Or changed significantly?
yes, so certainly, the Title IX policy is absolutely a significant overhaul. Back in August of 2020, there was a significant overhaul of the federal regulations with respect to Title IX and how districts are to investigate Title IX claims.
Okay, but you said we have no
You really don't. And
discretion.
because the way that you now need to investigate a Title IX claim from a federal standpoint versus how you would investigate a state claim of sexual discrimination versus sexual harassment. There are now two separate grievance procedures and protocols that school districts have to follow and that you would have to be trained in. It is very highly technical. It is very procedural, very prescribed, and if we don't comply with that methodology, again, we're going to have some significant exposure on our hands, either from complainants or respondents. And so particularly under the Title IX and sexual harassment claims, there's more of a balanced approach between complainants and respondents than probably there would have been in previous years. And
Okay.
so it's a matter of ensuring that both parties receive ample due process as that investigation
But you're
plays
saying
out.
there we don't have discretion anyways.
You really don't.
So one other technical or not technical, I understand the blueprint, I understood the red print, I didn't get the green print.
So the green print, yes, so that's a great question. So what we do, again, is we take our model policies, we run a red line from one year to the next, which demonstrates either the technical changes or the substantive changes so that it's easy for you to follow along.
Right.
The blue is new, the red is a strikeout, the green means the language was already in the policy, we just moved it to a different location. So
Okay.
it's not new language, it's just been moved.
Okay, I just.
No, that's a great question.
I'm done, thanks.
Deb?
Madam Chair, I have a few questions on a few of the policies. Would now be an okay time for me to pose those? Okay. So on policy 6212, which is on page 4 of our booklet, this policy is on parent-teacher communication, and it doesn't specify that guardians would also be allowed to communicate with the teacher, which is unusual for our policies, and I'm wondering if there's a reason for that, and if it should be there, then could we add it in?
So we can absolutely change it. I will say the reason why it only says parent and not guardian is because under 10-220, it specifically refers to having a policy on parent-teacher communication. So we're just following the wording of the statute, but absolutely, I think that that's perfectly acceptable to also add guardian, because I do believe that was the intent of the statute, but it actually doesn't say that.
Awesome, thank you. And on policy 5130, on page 39 of our book, we talk about the limits for transportation by grade level. And this is split up, I assume, in accordance with state statute, and it splits grades 1 through 3, and then grades 4 through 8. And I'm wondering if we could split it in a way that's more practical for our district, which would be 1 through 5 and 6 through 8. And I think that would still allow us to be within state law, but more permissive than state law.
So I can certainly speak to the legality of that, and then I'll certainly defer to the administration on the practical implications of that, because they would be better versed in that than I am. But from a legal standpoint, so the guidelines with respect to what you're referring to are really only that. It's not statutory, it's not codified in state law. It's a suggestion and a guidance document from the state that most people do follow. You have to be within the confines of that, but what you're asking to do is more beneficial to our students, so it's absolutely acceptable from a legal standpoint. If we were trying to be less favorable, that would be problematic, but you're trying to be overly inclusive. So from a legal standpoint, I think that that's perfectly acceptable. I'll defer to the administration from the practical implications of that.
Yes, certainly. We, as you probably know, we do transport all children K through 5 in the 1 mile range. I have found it beneficial. It is currently written like this, and however, we're more permissive in the K through 5 than the state suggestion here. I noticed some parents have appreciated that when they notice, really, if we needed to, we could have a higher limit for 4 and 5. And so that's worked out to our advantage in some ways, where they can see that we are being as permissive as we possibly can. And since we're transporting all the children to one school in that grade level, that's all I would say, is it's helped us. In a very recent situation, I had a parent asking for a ride at, well under a mile. And when the parent noticed for that grade, and the parent noticed it was actually 1.5 miles, that we had the latitude to go up to 1.5 miles, really said, oh wow, I see that you're already being even more permissive than you need to. So having it did not hurt us in many situations, and the line, we certainly have the opportunity to flex down like that.
Yeah, I just worry about causing unneeded stress on families that live, say, 1.25 miles from the elementary school, that suddenly their 4th grader is going to have to walk to school while their 1st grader is going to have the bus.
Generally, I
But yeah,
really say
we don't
that
do that, though.
we don't.
Right, I know that we don't, and so that's why I thought our policy maybe should just match what we do.
Well, I think and that's fine. I think logically, though, and that's something for the committee to consider, but logically, I think that the difference with the state, with the K-3, you see is broken down in where they talk about crossing guards, they talk about pedestrian crossing, they talk K-3 versus grades 4 through 12. And so that's how the state breaks the distinction there.
Last question. Policy 5691, on page 53, this is the Title IX policy. And in the middle of the paragraph at the top of page 53, we say the administration shall also periodically provide training to all board employees, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that we have a sense of what we mean by periodically, which is probably once a school year or something like that. And I'm wondering if we want to say that, or if we have to leave it this way, or if we just feel more comfortable leaving it this way in case it doesn't work out that way.
It's a great question. It's actually not once a year. You're going to be surprised by the answer. So the CHRO recently, so again, this policy looks at sexual harassment and sex discrimination under the lens of federal law and under the lens of state law. if we look at under the lens of federal law, and so this is referring generally to both with respect to training. Federal law, the new Title IX regs don't say anything about how often you have to have training. They don't specify the duration, they don't specify how frequently. What they do specify is if I'm going to be identified as a Title IX coordinator or I'm going to be involved at any level in the investigatory process, because there's 3 levels of the investigatory process, I have to be trained. That's all it says. On the state law with respect to sexual discrimination, CHRO recently implemented a new provision that said within 6 months of my hire, I have to be trained, and then at least every 10 years thereafter, subject to a periodic training. I know. That's why you're going to be surprised by the answer. So I think putting an onus of once a year when it isn't required, but I do agree with you when we talk about periodic training. I think obviously the administration should make in good judgment how often they should be providing that training. And certainly if we're bringing on new Title IX directors or new investigators, they should be having that training pretty regularly. But saying once per year might be more onerous than it needs to be.
Thank you.
Claire, yes.
But for all staff, this isn't covering the mandatory training that all staff goes through at the beginning of the year for a lot of these laws that they must comply with. This is a Title IX specific
Well, right. So
role.
we're not talking about other mandates. Of course not.
Okay, so
Right.
this is not all staff. This is the Title IX.
Well, but then
Make all staff aware, however, of the.
Yes, right. But then in terms of when I come on board as an employee, the law did recently change that it's within 6 months of hire, and then it's within 10 years. It used to previously be a 3-year requirement. So
Okay.
that has changed.
Okay.
But certainly we could do that more frequently. There's nothing saying we
Right.
can't.
And just a couple of questions. On page 6, policies 6291, is virtual now considered a meeting? And when you use the term meeting?
I'm sorry, can you just tell me which policy?
Sir, policy 6291.
But what's the name of it?
Page 6.
What's the name of it?
Parent and family engagement policy.
Oh, for Title I students?
I'm just wondering, when you say meeting and attend this meeting, are we allowing virtual to be?
Wait, you're talking about parent-teacher communication.
Yeah, bottom of page 6.
So I have a different
Yeah, probably.
booklet
No, not the communication one, the engagement policy.
for Title I students.
Yeah.
6291,
291.
parent and family engagement policy for Title I students.
Yes.
Okay, and which paragraph?
Down at the bottom.
Yes,
Bless
each
you.
year.
Bless you.
Down at the bottom, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Claire, can you just read that?
Sure, it says, shall conduct a meeting at a convenient time to involve parents in the planning. And then later it says the parents must be invited and encouraged to attend at this meeting. And I'm just wondering, is meeting in post-COVID now considered a possible virtual? And I'm just feeling transportation can be very difficult for some families, and convenience of being able to leave work. And I'm just wondering if virtual meetings can be very preferable to some parents.
Yeah, so I'm sorry that I didn't understand your question originally, and the reason why I got confused, but I think that this is helpful, is in the previous policy, the parent-teacher communication, there was recently a legislative change post-COVID that would say, for a parent-teacher conference, parents have to be told that they have an opportunity to attend a parent-teacher conference either through telephone or remote. We don't have the same requirement here for what is a federal regulation with respect to Title I, because the previous one is state, but certainly, I think we could draw on an analogy there, and if you wanted us to clarify, to also say, of course, we will make that available. We also have the new FOI requirements, that if I'm going to have any type of remote meeting, I have to provide equipment to those who wouldn't have that equipment at home. So we could certainly, if you wanted to do that, absolutely add something to that effect.
I just think it's a great accommodation, especially for a population that might have difficulty making a meeting.
I think that makes great sense, and it just isn't required by federal law. And so we try to stick to what's required. But absolutely, that is an area where you do have discretion.
Okay. And then on page 10, policy 6330, homework, does there need to be a disclaimer for students with IEPs or 504s? So when it says all students comply with the homework requirement imposed by the school?
As per their
Any modifications with that would be
Are in their
handled
IEP.
through their IEPs, individual IEPs and such.
Okay, thanks.
And also, there's procedures down below that the superintendent would establish, and that should address those concerns.
Other questions? All right, so we have considered this as our first reading, and we will come together again to review these as a second reading. Thank you so much, and as we move along, all right, yes. Thank you so much. And as we now move to Section B, ratification of the West Hartford Board of Education Administrators Association contract. I just want to give a shout out, Megan, bless your heart, you are still here. Please, by all means, if you want to depart, you certainly can. But you're welcome to stay as well, but you can depart. You're a student, you have studies, yes. Thank you.
Save yourself, Megan.
May I also say you have great taste in choosing student representatives. Megan is one of our beloved babysitters in our home, so quite the pleasure to see her here.
All right. Thank you. All right. So welcome, thank you once again. We have Ann here, and Jessica and Julio, thank you so very much. And Liz, thank you so very much. So passing it to you, please.
All right, good evening, everyone. Before you for approval is a ratified agreement between the Board of Education and the West Hartford Board of Education Administrators Association. This is a group of approximately 50 extremely dedicated and highly skilled educational leaders that work tirelessly to ensure that various needs of all students, families, and staff are met each day. The Administrators Association ratified this agreement on October 17th. The contract that you're voting on this evening is a 3-year contract and will call for a step movement as well as a general wage increase in 2023-24 of 2.75% and in 2024-25 and in 2025-26 of 2.5%. In addition, we have increased the annuity payment by $250 for each contract year. So that summarizes this agreement. I did, as always, want to take a moment to just thank our exceptional administrators for the work that they do every single day. They have consistently shown a willingness to change direction at a moment's notice and to do whatever needs to be done to ensure both student and staff safety, as well as making sure that each child has the support they need to reach their true potential. So at this time, we would be happy to answer any questions that the board may have on this agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Teammates, any questions, comments? Jason, yes.
I just wanted to thank the team for this this negotiation process, and also in the midst of our conversation, I was hearing a potential question from Mr. Goldman about whether or not this could maybe fit within the budget, and
Not covered.
and it is most definitely within the thresholds of the budget anticipated, and also meets the needs of our administrators. So it's a great fit. No, I'm telling.
So thank you, Jason. I should have just started by thanking the entire team here, certainly sitting with me, but also wanted to thank 3 of our board members, Gayle, Lorna, and Jason, for helping and participating on and during the contract negotiation. So, and I hope it was enlightening too for you to learn and to hear some of the different things that go into that. But yes, I like to give Ethan his moment in the spotlight, but but since you've ruined it, Jason, yes, it is budgeted for.
Well, we have one more.
That's okay. There's another.
All right, so we'll now seek a motion that the Board of Education ratify the negotiated agreement between the West Hartford Board of Education Administrators Association and the Board of Education for the period of July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2026. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ari, for moving and seconding. Jason, any discussion? All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed? The ayes have it. All right. And moving right along to the ratification of the West Hartford Board of Education Cafeteria Manager's Contract.
Great. So before you for approval is a ratified agreement between the Board of Education and the West Hartford Board of Education cafeteria managers. This is a group of 6 extremely dedicated employees that oversee all of the day-to-day operations in their assigned cafeteria. As a reminder, we provide over 4,500 nutritious meals each day to our students. The cafeteria managers ratified this agreement on September 19th. The contract that you're voting on this evening is a 4-year contract. Looking at the insurance category for 2022-23, we will maintain the employee premium cost share at 20%. After that, we will increase in 23-24 to 20.5%, and then in 24-25 and 25-26 to 21%. Looking at the wages category, each year, members on steps 1 through 6 will move up a step and receive a 2.5% general wage increase, while members on step 7 will receive a 3% general wage increase. Lastly, we have increased the longevity payment by $125 for each category. So that summarizes this agreement. And again, I did want to take a moment to thank all of our outstanding cafeteria managers for the passion that they bring every day to work with them that helps ensure we have not only created a safe but a healthy environment for all of our students to enjoy. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have on this agreement.
Yeah, I was just curious, with 6, or you said 6 employees, do they handle multiple schools, or how do you break them down, and how is that divvied up?
Yep, so we have one person's responsible for Conard, you have one at Hall, one at KP, one at Cedric, and then you have 2 folks that split the responsibilities between Bristow and the 11 elementary schools.
Other questions?
I'm waiting to see if Jason will ask my question. Answer the question.
I'm not familiar with this one.
I assume it's within the, okay. I was hoping to save myself a question.
All right. And so with that, we'll seek a motion that the Board of Education ratify the negotiated agreement between the West Hartford Board of Education Cafeteria Managers Union and the Board of Education for the period of July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2026. Is there a motion?
I so motion.
Thank you, Claire. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ethan. Discussion? All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so very much. Collectively, thank you all so very much. Moving on to staff communications and reports, we now will receive our superintendent's report. Yes, wake those eyes up.
I'm awake. All right. A long time ago, it seems, we had the students from the SAVE group of Conard, and I wanted just to thank them for being here. You may remember Ann and Eric Dempsey talked about this group at the presentation about the safety and security. It's an outreach that we've been doing now for a couple of years from the Sandy Hook Promise group, and there are groups at each of our secondary schools, and it's really a nice club that's doing a lot of great things this year. We're 7 weeks into the school year. We appreciate all the parental support and all of the great feedback we're getting from parents and from students. I know that teachers are looking forward to conferences coming up in mid-November. Can share, and happy to share, that through grants and other funding, we're going to be able to keep our breakfast and lunches free for all students through the winter break. We're confident that we're, based on the funding that we had, as well as some extra surplus within that account, that we're comfortable going ahead and making that through winter break, and then that's a natural time to then transition to starting back up again and charging. And so we'll be making sure that parents are well aware of that prior to that. All of our community and eligible students are encouraged to receive both flu and COVID booster vaccinations. Please contact the West Hartford Health District or local pharmacies to schedule. There have been a number of recent vaccination clinics within our community and a number coming up as well. We're still actively hiring for substitute positions, as well as paraprofessional and teaching assistant positions. Please visit our website under Human Resources or call 860-561-6694 directly, and Mr. Duarte will be happy to take your information and welcome you to our schools. I had the pleasure today of having lunch at Aiken with Himani, our convocation speaker. And I can share that she's having a great 5th grade year, and she passes along her best to all of you as well. And 10th and 11th graders participated in the PSAT last week at both high schools. 9th graders participated in a program on defining success and overcoming adversity during that period, while 12th graders received individual support for seniors requiring help in college application process, completing applications, selecting schools, finalizing financial aid, and applying for that, and for essay writing as well. And on a final then note, on a sad note, Peg Beecher, who was a long-standing principal at Charter Oak and at Bugby Elementary School, passed away last week. Peg retired from the district in 2010, and universally, I believe, was loved as someone with just an incredible amount of love and integrity for students and for the district herself. I personally remember Peg. We overlapped for a year or two when I first came to the district, and always found her gracious and just completely caring, and a true gentlewoman. And so she passed away last week, and we're all very sorry for that as well. So many of you may know her or had children who know her as well. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Dr. Morrow. Any questions, teammates, regarding our superintendent's report from this evening? Jason.
Yeah, thank you for the report. I remember in the old days, we had a statistic on number of students who had been vaccinated and boosted. Is that something that will continue to do, or has that form of information or reporting waned?
Yeah, that reporting information has waned with that. We sometimes, certain circumstances, we will have that information. If a parent volunteers it, oftentimes around sports, if there's issues around that, but that's not information that we're tracking anymore.
Okay, thank you.
But we do encourage everyone to stay current on boosters as well as the flu shot. Let's not underestimate the impact of that as well.
Quick question.
Claire, yes.
So today was the launch of the new security lockdown system.
Yes.
How did that go?
That was great. It went very successful. Today was our first true testing of the entire system at Conard. Went very well. It was attended, obviously, by police, by fire. Some minor tweaks that we need to address there, but I think we're being in good format, and we're looking forward to rolling it out within the other schools as well then.
Other questions, comments? All right, thank you so much. Moving on now to routine matters, our financial report. We will receive this update from Deb. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, and good evening, everybody. This is the financial report for the year ending June 30, 2022. So these are our year-end financials, as we're on a July 1 start date for our fiscal year. And the report that you see in your packet basically reflects what we've been reporting all year. There are no huge surprises here, but I just want to walk you through a couple of the highlights of the report. So generally speaking, we were able to come in almost at exactly on budget. We did return just under $57,000 to the town, which we don't really like to do, but that does represent only 0.03% of our budget, so that is pretty much as close as possible to being exactly on budget as we could be. Thank you so much for making sure of that. We did have, you may remember, an education non-lapsing account that we set up a couple of years ago with $750,000 in that. We plan to use that over 2 years. We did use that over 2 years, and now that account is empty and no longer exists. A few other highlights. You'll see we had a surplus in salary. Some of that is due to just the wide range of salaries that we have for our teachers. So if you think about what somebody might come in at if they're fresh out of college and first-year teacher versus somebody who comes in with 10 or 15 years of experience as a teacher and maybe some advanced degrees. And we try to hire a mix, and Julia always tells us that we have a good mix of that. But that does result in a little bit of fluctuation on salaries, and you can read some of the additional details there. Under purchase services, we have higher than we had anticipated out of district tuition expenditures. So that was a factor that caused us to exceed our budget under purchase services. Under our grants fund, we can go over to page 71 of your packet. So we can look at all of our grants. And excuse that I keep sneezing. I'm having a little bit of allergies today. So you see about 60% of the way down the page, there's a faint line across. And the grants that are above that line are mostly 2-year grants. The grants that are below that line are the older grants, most of which are ending. So there are a few grants that we are going to be returning back to the state, and those are generally the non-public school grants. So we are the recipient of these grants, and then it's the non-public schools in town that actually, I think it's like they apply through us to get those grants. And so we let them know the grants exist, and if they apply for them, then they are able to receive them. And if they don't, then we end up returning them to the state. We did also return a district grant of $8 back to the state. So never let it be said that we're trying to find uses, for the last few pennies here and there. We return that back. So the largest carryover that we do have, though, most of the way down the page, are the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 grants. So you'll see we're carrying forward about $9.6 million in total combined under those 2 grants. And just as a reminder, ESSER 2 goes through next September, 9/30/2023. ESSER 3 goes through 9/30/2024. And so we do have some extra time to use those funds. Moving on to the Special Programs Fund report. As a reminder, this is all one fund, so don't be concerned that some of the individual lines are in deficit because we use the other lines to offset those. So you'll see that we started the year with about $2 million or so in reserve and ended with about $1.9 million in reserve. And nothing terribly notable here. The one item I will point out is the educational services reimbursement line, where our expenditures far exceed our revenue, and that has to do with, if I recall correctly, special education services that are provided to our open choice students, and then the reimbursement that we receive from their home district. Get that right? Awesome. All right, so moving to the next page, our Nutrition Services Fund. This has looked really good all year and continues to look really, really good. With some of the extra funds, we have been able to purchase new ovens for Hall, a new refrigerator for Morley, and there are more equipment and supplies purchases to come. And as was stated earlier, when we were talking about the cafeteria manager's contract, we're still serving about 4,800 meals on average each day, which far exceeds where we were a couple of years ago. So probably a result of a combination of the food just being really excellent and the food being free. Never not important that it's free. So that is a testament to our cafeterias. And just one other item on this page, under other changes right near the bottom, you'll see some additional revenue, and that does include some state reimbursement from the COVID year that came in after the fact. So that is recorded as part of that line. So all in all, we had a fairly predictable year, not too many surprises, and we ended up right where we wanted to be. And I'm happy to take questions or to have Liz answer those questions.
And thank you, and please pardon me for not acknowledging your presence, Liz. Thank you so much for being here as well.
I am
Thank you.
happy to be here and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Gayle, yes.
So I just had a question on this. You ended up the year with a like $57,000 surplus, and that you then have to return that to the town?
Yes, there was an exception that was made a couple of years ago because it was the end of the 2020 school year and we had all this leftover money because we weren't busing people to school for a few months. And so that year we were able to set up a non-lapsing account with the town to utilize for the next 2 years. And so that is what we did, but typically if there is any leftover money, we do return it back to the town general fund.
And what if you had the opposite happen?
That never happens because I believe under state statute, it comes out of our personal wallets when that happens.
Our personal wallet?
Yes.
Oh, I guess that never happens.
That's why it never happens. That's why we budget conservatively.
Okay, thank you.
Gayle, I'm impressed with that little sassy. I don't know, that was so right. Okay, pardon me. Any other questions at all regarding our financial report? All right, seeing or hearing none, seeking a motion that the Board of Education approve the financial report for the year ending June 30th, 2022.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Ethan. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion. Thank you, Deb. Any discussion? All right, all of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so very much. Now moving on to approval of the minutes, seeking a motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting on September 20th, 2022. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ari. Any discussion? All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Moving right along to information and reports. Do we have any reports on communication and reports from our board members here? From other boards and organizations? Or other information and discussions? Seeing none, moving right along to future business, announcement of future meeting dates. Our next Board of Education meeting will be on Tuesday, November the 1st, 2022, right here in room 314 at 7 p.m., followed by a meeting on Tuesday, November the 15th, 2022 at 7 o'clock, right here in the Legislative Chambers, room 314. Do we have a request for any future agenda items? Hearing none. Do we have any visitors here that would like to make a comment? Seeing none. We do not have an executive session. However, once we adjourn this meeting, we will convene for a non-meeting for the purpose of conducting a personnel search committee meeting related to the superintendent search. Again, this is not an executive session. This is a non-meeting. And with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Deb. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ari. Meeting adjourned at 10:33.